Right now, the Prime Minister has vowed not to quit as he takes responsibility for Labour's abysmal local council results so far. The party faces a local wipeout across England.
With more than 45 of the 136 council results in so far. Major losses in Tameside, Hartlepool and as polls predict, Labour could lose 1,500 councils.
And there's further misery for the Prime Minister. In just a few minutes, the number of migrants who have crossed the Channel by small boats surpassed 200,000 since 2018. Meanwhile, Nigel Farage says the best is yet to come as Reform UK makes major gains in traditional Labour and Conservative territory, with victories already declared in key battlegrounds.
And
Labour are being wiped out by Reform in many of their most traditional areas, and what you're going to see later on today is the Conservative Party being wiped out in their heartlands like Essex.
It's a wipeout for the Tories in Essex. Huge concerns for the major parties here as Nigel Farage begins what he thinks is a revolution in British politics.
Labour is doing well for the country, so I think he should just carry on doing what he's doing.
I think he should resign because realistically he is a Conservative.
I think he's really poor, just needs to get out of here.
He said Conservatives are coming back, and here we are.
Welcome to Wales, where a huge political earthquake is underway. Labour and Wales have been synonymous for over 100 years. Since the Senedd began back in '99, Labour has always been in charge. That ends today. It's a tussle between Plaid and Reform, though a Reform source has told me recently that he thinks that Plaid have won. Meanwhile, in West Wales, the First Minister, Eluned Morgan, could lose her seat here.
He's doing a fantastic job. He's led our party to become the largest it has ever been in the party's history. I love working side by side with Ed. We make a strong leadership team, but he is the right person to lead us into the next election.
meanwhile, Reform UK has just gained control of Essex County Council from the Conservatives.
But it's been a mixed night for the Tories, who have lost 158 seats, but they have taken Westminster City Council from Labour.
Yes, with Labour losing to everyone, everywhere, and worse still to come. Fled number 10 at the building behind me. For now, he clings on to his position, but for how long can it last?
Yes, up here in Scotland, there's so many narratives to grab onto here. It really has been an election campaign unlike any other, and unlike previous years, we just don't know how this is going to shake out. We're still early into the count here in Glasgow, but over the next couple of hours, we're expecting that deluge of votes coming in.
Well, welcome to a major day in British politics. Great to have your company this afternoon.
Indeed, yeah, it's been a seismic night and a seismic day and continues on to the weekend. Is this the end of two-party politics? Are we witnessing the end of Keir Starmer? Many people are saying, I would have voted Labour apart from Keir Starmer. Absolutely seismic results coming in, and we'll bring him all live here on Good Afternoon Britain.
Well, Sir Keir Starmer has said that he will stay on as Prime Minister despite these disastrous local election losses for his party.
Speaking in Ealing in West London, he admitted it had been a tough night.
I think it's very important that we don't sugarcoat these results, so I'm not going to do that. They are tough results, I accept that. They reflect voters who don't feel that their lives have changed enough or quickly enough, and that's been going on for a long time. We were elected to deal with that, and I'm not going to walk away from that responsibility and plunge the country into chaos.
Well, it comes as Reform UK has made major gains across England, having just gained control of Essex County Council. Well, Nigel Farage has hailed it as a historic shift in British politics.
Labour are being wiped out by Reform in many of their most traditional areas, and what you're going to see later on today is the Conservative Party being wiped out in their heartlands like Essex.
And counting is also underway in Scotland and Wales, where voters are waiting to learn who will govern their countries.
Well, we're joined now by our political editor, Christopher Hope. Chris, great to have you in the studio. So many developments just in the last few moments.
Absolutely. Essex falling to Reform UK is huge. Essex is the county of Essex man, of Tory voter. It's the home county of Kemi Badenoch, of course, the Saffron Walden MP, Priti Patel in Witham, in Braintree, Sir James Cleverly. All those seats, the entire council has gone to Reform UK, and they're still counting. It's a complete landslide. We're told that they are delighted. A Reform UK spokesman has told this to me in the past few seconds. This is a momentous day for the party. We haven't just won in Essex, we have landslided a Tory heartland. That's how important that is, and it builds on this momentum behind Reform UK, certainly outside London, where it is eating into the support of both the two main parties, Conservatives and Labour. A real worry. The first of the counts, of course, which started at 9 a.m, has been a pause in counting. Around the fifth of the counts in English county councils had happened before dawn, and the rest are starting now, and it will turn it into a flurry of results going forward.
And that flurry of results, Chris, what can we expect over the next few hours? Some major announcements set to come.
Yes, we're looking at Hackney, where we're seeing whether that council turns from Labour to Green. Again, a real blow for Labour. Many of the inner London seats will report back. The Greens are forecast to do very well there. We're looking at Greater Manchester, where Andy Burnham's base is. Reform doing well there. That is where we're shaping up to go to. And also, of course, we have reporters in Scotland and Wales. Wales, it looks like Reform UK are telling Catherine Forster, our colleague, that Plaid Cymru have won that, Reform at second, and it's likely that the Plaid will, in that case, be able to form some form of coalition if they don't win an outright majority with maybe the Greens and Labour. And Scotland looking like an SNP government with Reform second. All that will play out in the next 4 hours.
OK, let's bring Tom Harwood into it. Tom, you've been covering this for the last few hours with magnificent work on the boards. They're colouring in various bits and pieces. Another key battleground coming up in the next couple of hours is Blackburn, Manchester and Sheffield. These are going to be very important areas.
Certainly, and we've seen this sort of traditional area. I think Sheffield is going to be one of these interesting ones because you do have a lot of student votes. Traditionally, it had been Sheffield Hallam, for instance, was Nick Clegg's constituency. It went to Labour. Ultimately, could the Greens be picking up in the centre there? But then as you get further out into the sort of post-industrial areas in the northwest, Red Wall, that whole area, that is fertile Reform territory. We've already seen in places like Andy Burnham's backyard, Angela Rayner's own constituency, Reform are sweeping up.
Interesting.
Interesting place for it to be in. We've got Matthew Talbot in the studio as well, Labour commentator, Matthew Talbot. Now, we've just heard the defence that the Prime Minister's put out after the election results that are coming out so far. Do you think his position, as some are saying today, has actually been reinforced because it's perhaps not as disastrous as it needs to be to force an immediate challenge?
I mean, yes. Why give up? I mean, you've crashed your car, you've not died. I mean, what of that is not a disaster if it's still a car crash? We've only just done better, or certainly Labour have only just done better than the worst any government would have ever have done historically. I'm livid, really, this morning, because as much as I've left the party, there are people out there that think they rely on a Labour government to give them a fair life. There's no fairness in this country. The government haven't acted. They've been pernicious in their policy when the total toxicity of winter fuel and other aspects of things like that I see David Lammy saying things like, you don't change the pilot halfway through a flight. Well, you do if the pilot can't fly the plane. If they don't act, the Labour MPs that don't act on this will be complicit in the death of the Labour Party.
We've got Victoria Atkins waiting on the line, but just very quickly, Chris Hope.
Well, just one thing on that. In 1999, Labour lost 1,100 council seats, and Labour went on to win a landslide in 2001. Surely it's not now is not a moment of panic.
Well, but we didn't have reform as a spoiler. It was a two-party system, and the Greens on the other side. And at the same time, we're performing worse than when Jeremy Corbyn was leader in areas. We're losing places like Merseyside, for Christ's sake. And at the same time, Nigel Farage is doing better than what Boris Johnson was at that time. So it's inevitable to me.
OK, and let's go to Conservative Shadow Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Secretary Victoria Atkins. Victoria, how was it for you? How are you feeling today?
Well, we knew it was going to be a tough night, and we've lost lots of really good Conservative councillors and candidates. But there are signs of progress. We knew that, less than 2 years out from a general election where we got a clobbering, and we've acknowledged that, and we are working to win back people's trust. We knew last night was going to be tough, but as I say, there are signs of progress. And Kemi has, I think, she's had a really good campaign all over the country, this campaign, and certainly her approval ratings with the public are much higher than any other party leaders. But also, people are really noticing what Kemi is doing with us as a party, reshaping our party and putting forward policies that I hope your viewers, when it comes to it in 3 years' time, will really, really find some strength and want to get behind, because we're doing that deep thinking that I don't think any other party can seriously claim they're doing.
Victoria, Labour has a Keir Starmer problem, obviously. The general consensus this morning is that Kemi has a Conservative problem. Do you think your party will ever recover from the 14 years you were in power?
Yes, I do. And I think, as I say, today, whilst it's been a tough night, and I'm not, trying to get away from that, today we're seeing that there are, green shoots of progress. So, for example, we've won back Westminster. That is a really significant result for us. We've now become the largest party on Wandsworth. And we've also seen victory in seats that Reform were rather, I have to say, rather cockily claiming that they would win, including Bexley. That was their #1 target in London, and we have held on to that. We've seen in Harlow, Reform were claiming that they'd win all 11 seats that are up for grabs. They didn't. In fact, we did. And whilst, of course, we acknowledge there are other parts of the country where we haven't sadly landed our message as well as we would like, and we've seen some losses. Nonetheless, we do see there's real signs of progress so soon, frankly, after, as I say, a very poor general election result for us that we freely admit to.
Victoria Atkins, you talk about signs of progress and a message being received across the country. As it stands, I think you're down 103 councillors across the country. And I know you conceded saying it's been a tough night, but you have had a new leader and a new message for quite some time now. Why do you think that message isn't landing? You're very open about the fact that that's not working in a lot of the country. What do you think the main weakness is? What's causing that?
Yeah, so thank you for asking. So we know across different parts of the country, for example, there are some councils, including Essex and Hampshire, where their last set of elections was in 2021, where we were benefiting from a very, very large post-COVID vaccine bounce. Remember how relieved we all were to be let out of our houses after that dreadful lockdown. And so we knew we were polling at 43% then, because of the vaccine, and we knew that that was a historic high and that we were going to lose seats this time round. This is why we've been very open about this. We've also been open about the new state of politics. Kemi has been talking about the fact that this is a multi-party democracy in which we now live for many, many, many months now, and we're beginning to see the impacts of that. But I would just say, in terms of the public's reaction to our national messages, they're really beginning to come through. And for example, things like the winter fuel payment debacle that this Labour government put the country through, it was the Conservatives that led the opposition to that and forced the U-turn. every single U-turn that this government has made is because of Conservative work within the House of Commons, often helped with people on the outside, including our wonderful farmers that I've worked with and with GBNews to get rid of that vindictive family farm tax. This is what we are doing. We are holding this government to account, and I'm afraid other parties, including Reform, are very often absent when we are putting this opposition forward and holding the government to account.
Victoria, you mentioned Reform there. Let's talk about Essex. You mentioned pensioners. My mum is a pensioner in Essex. Reform have taken Essex. That is not good news for the Conservative Party. It's your heartland.
Look, again, I fully acknowledge that. And as I say, in Essex, it was we had a historical high of Conservative councillors in the county following the election in 2021, because many, many people, understandably, wanted to, vote Conservative, and we were polling very, very high because of the post-COVID bounce. So we knew that we were going to, sadly, see some losses in those parts of the country where we had that historical high. Essex is one of them. Hampshire is another area like that. But please, we are both acknowledging these losses, but also showing that we've got a hell of a lot of fight left in us, and we will be not just holding this Labour government to account, but also ensuring that we get answers to questions such as, why did Nigel Farage receive a gift of £5 million from a gentleman and not declare it? These are important questions because, again, one of the messages I think all political parties have received over this campaign is that public trust in politics and in democracy is very low at the moment. I, for one, with Kemi, want to see that rebuilt, but we understand we can only do that by being frank with people, making clear that there are going to be tough decisions ahead of us, but also being unclear about what we stand for. And my goodness, with Kemi Badenoch, I think everybody knows what she stands for, who she stands up for, and the future that we are crafting as a Conservative Party, not just now, but for the general election to come.
Okay.
Victoria Atkins, Tom Harwood here. I just wanted to ask, you say that there was a high watermark of the Essex County Council in 2021. That's sort of putting a gloss over things, isn't it? Because I'm looking at the results here. Only 54 seats have so far been declared. There are 78 seats on the council, and Reform have already declared a majority. It's not just that they're winning by a whisker. This is an absolute landslide in Essex. So far, less than a dozen Tory seats have been declared. I think a small handful of Tory seats have been declared. This is a complete Conservative wipeout in the county that has the seat of your party leader, your party housing secretary, and your party's foreign secretary.
Yeah, look, we acknowledge that this has been a very, very tough night. But interestingly, I don't know, Tom, if you've seen, there's the polling gurus have been looking at all the figures as the results come in. And interestingly, they are suggesting, I think, Mr. Kellner is one of the polling analysts on this, saying that actually Reform did less well. It appears to be doing less well in this set of elections than they did a year ago. Now, as a proud Lincolnshire MP, sadly we lost our county council to Reform, and my constituents are paying higher council taxes as a result of having a Reform county council. But it is interesting that there'll be lots of number crunching over the next few hours as to what this actually means behind all of the interviews and the speeches that obviously you're going to feature. But what we want to, I hope, really get across to people is that we know this is going to take time for us to win back trust, but we are putting the hard work in a way that others aren't. And there's a lot of boasting and cockiness from certain parts of our political parties at the moment, our opponents, and we are the ones saying, hang on, you've got to be able to substantiate the claims you make, including, for example, claiming that you'll cut taxes when you have no plans as to how you're going to pay for that, and then residents being let down with their council tax bills.
OK, Victoria Atkins, thank you so much. That's Conservative Shadow Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Secretary Victoria Atkins there.
Right, let's cross live now to our reporter Sam Francis, who's in Hackney in East London for us, where the Green Party has just won the mayoralty there. Sam, we've just heard from the successful candidates talking about how the Greens would be taking on genocide and profit.
Absolutely, Charlie. Dawn, good afternoon to you. Well, just in the last few minutes, Hackney has decided, at least for part one of today's results, that election for the Mayor of Hackney now confirmed to be securely and firmly a Green win. Just bring you some of the figures I managed to scribble down just as those results came in. Greens securing 35,720 votes, a soaring increase in votes on the 2022 result. That is up 25,000 votes against a Labour result of just over 26,000 votes. So firmly another win for the Greens here in central London. It is one of the boroughs that we are most closely watching today, as it could mark a push from people who would traditionally vote Labour deciding to move further towards the left and signal their vote towards the Greens. Now, in her winning statement today, she said, the winner of this seat in Hackney, she said, "Today we take the fight back." People, she says, feel let down, and as you mentioned, Charlie, she pushed back on a government she said supports genocide and doesn't just want to tweak around the edges but wants to make a serious and significant change, Zoe Gerbert said in Hackney. Now, just behind me, the vote has also begun for the 57 council seats now up for grabs. That vote around 5 o'clock, we're expecting to hear results. Back in 2022, there were 57 seats also up for grabs in Hackney. 50 of those were won by Labour, 5 to the Conservatives and just 2 to the Greens. Now, Labour were hoping today that if the result swung in their favour, and we now know that the mayoral seat at least has gone to the Greens, they were hoping that it would be a sign of revival and resistance against this turning tide, and it turns out that that has not been the case. The Greens winning firmly and securely already. We'll have to wait and see whether the same can be said for the 57 council seats that are up for grabs in wards across Hackney throughout the rest of the day. As I say, 5 o'clock-ish, we are expecting to hear the result of those seats later today.
Sam Francis, thank you so much. And the temptation to ask so many of these Green politicians which part of their constituency genocide is actually happening in is really starting to drive me nuts. Sam Francis in Hackney there for us. Just welcoming the first Green MP.
Right, well, we're joined now by the Labour MP for Peterborough, Andrew Pakes. Andrew, thank you very much for joining us on GB News this afternoon. It's been a dramatic set of election results so far, particularly for the Labour Party. I think all of your colleagues are conceding that it's been a very tough night for the party. But what does this mean in particular for the leader, Sir Keir Starmer? Some of your colleagues going so far as to say that now an orderly exit should be organised.
Good morning. I've been up all night. We've done our count. So firstly, congratulations to everyone who's won. It's no mean feat putting yourself forward for election. And as a Democrat, I should be congratulating everyone. Look, clearly, it's been a difficult night for Labour. It wasn't as bad as it could have been in Peterborough. We didn't see the Reform or Green surge lap up around our knees. We did lose some seats, but we held our own and had a good campaign for it. Look, we've got to continue to convince people that the change they voted for at the general election is the change they need. So there's some work to be done there. The last thing the country needs, I think, is some musical chairs from the Labour Party, and just spending the next few weeks having an internal soap opera about what happens in it. So my message to colleagues is, let's listen to what the public said. Let's double down on the work we're doing on the NHS, the cost of living, getting housing done. And for some of those people who've been elected who aren't Labour candidates, they've got to demonstrate they can run councils.
I'm sorry,
and they can
Andrew,
fix
I've got to
potholes.
interrupt quickly. We've just got to head over to Birmingham City Council now for some results.
I give notice that the number of votes recorded for each candidate at the said election is as follows. Bowen Ian David, Liberal Democrats, 56. Higgs Andrew Adam, Local Conservatives, 1,342. Samuels Joe Aaron, known as Joe Samuels, Labour Party, 269. Sherman's Joanne, Green Party, 419. West Jason Lawrence Robert, known as Jason West, Reform UK, 877. The number of rejected votes was 6. Therefore, I'd like to welcome up onto the stage. I hereby therefore declare that Adam Higgs is duly elected as Councillor for Hyters Heath Ward. Congratulations. And just for clarity, we will not be doing acceptance speeches, so thank you. The next results will follow shortly.
Set of announcements we're expecting to come from Birmingham. But let's go back to Labour MP for Peterborough, Andrew Pakes. Andrew, thank you very much for your patience and for staying with us. There's been a development in Manchester for the Labour Party. It's not all doom and gloom for the party today.
Well, look, certainly we know we need to do better in getting our message across and demonstrating people we can deliver the change. You know, there's lots of council happening. It looks like it may not be as bad as has been predicted coming into this election, but we will mourn the loss of some really good, hard-working community councillors, all of which have done a great piece of work. And this is what happens. It's a midterm election, but it's the first time we've been in a multi-party system. So some of those other people's mayors in Hackney and others have now got to demonstrate that they can't just talk the talk. They've got to fix the potholes. They've got to empty the bins. They've got to deliver the services. So me and my colleagues will be holding them to account now because they've won in some of these places.
Andrew, you have to be honest here. The problem with the Labour Party is Keir Starmer. We've heard it so many times this morning from people up and down the country. They would have voted Labour, but they can't bring themselves to do so because of Keir Starmer.
Look, people want to see us deliver on the cost of living, fixing the NHS, making sure they run good local services.
Yeah, Andrew, we've heard all that. We've heard all that. But the problem they have is your leader.
I think the problem is that we haven't changed the country fast enough. The leader is a separate question to how we get on with delivering, fixing this country.
It's not a separate question, Andrew, if people aren't voting for Labour because of it. It's the
We've got to get on. We've got to get on and fix the country. People voted for change, and I can understand the frustration they feel. We live in a very anxious world, and people want to see change coming about quicker. That's my job. My job is to ensure that people have more money in their pockets, they can see a GP quicker, that their potholes are fixed, and that they live in a safe country. That's what people want answers to.
I suppose, Andrew, you talked about all that the same day that we're talking about the fate of the Labour Party. We have now hit 200,000 small boat crossings since 2018. Now, of course, a lot of that is under Conservative rule, but many ideas being promoted, many critics saying that the Labour Party isn't getting a control of that issue. You talk about security, that's a big one straight away. Surely the leadership, as Dawn has said, is a key part of the offer you're providing to the country. And a lot of the data and a lot of the voting intentions we're seeing played out today demonstrates that they're not happy with the offer.
Well, certainly people in Peterborough want us to take a tough but fair approach to immigration. I think the leadership Shabana Mahmood is taking in the Home Office, and we're seeing some reduction in the small boat crossings. I think that's beginning to pay off. We're seeing faster deportations, but we've got to do better on immigration. I don't think anyone in the Labour government would say that anything other than that. People want to see us take action for it, and that's exactly what we're doing.
Andrew, it's interesting. Labour have done fairly well in Manchester so far. Andy Burnham's in Manchester. Would he be a better leader for you?
I think Andy Burnham has great strengths, but we have a Prime Minister. And I said that the last thing the country wants is us to do a Conservatives and spend months and months having internal debates about who's the leader of my party. Changing the leader is not going to make us take action quicker on the cost of living or fixing the NHS. We have a Prime Minister, we have a cabinet, and our job is to get on with selling the message and actually delivering the change people voted for.
Andrew, you're hemorrhaging votes to the left and to the right. Which party should you be more worried about? Reform or the Green Party?
Look, certainly people on the doorstep are not telling me that if the Labour Party was more left-wing and we spent more money, then they'd come flocking to my banner. So I think we've got to focus on the basics in life. That's getting, as you've said, about immigration, about the cost of living, about the NHS, making life better for people. If Labour can continue to deliver the change that people voted for, then I think we're going to see us having better days ahead.
Andrew, talking about the change that Labour wants to deliver, and you say is delivering, why is that they're not translating into votes for the Labour Party? And why is your Prime Minister, your leader, so uniquely unpopular if this change is being delivered? Is it purely because the time frame of delivery isn't quick enough? Or is there something with the delivery itself?
Look, after 14 years and the merry-go-round of Conservative prime ministers we saw, people are really impatient for change. I understand that. People want to see change now. And some of the changes are big and they take time, but we're actually focusing on delivering the energy price reductions through the money we put in people's pockets. We're beginning to see waiting lists coming down. In my city, we've seen the money for an investment in a new swimming pool. We've seen the new community diagnostic centre going up. But people want to see that change come quicker. And in the world we live in, that's not unfair of governments to be challenged to go quicker.
OK, Andrew, thank you so much. That's Labour MP for Peterborough, Andrew Paxam.
Right, let's go now to our deputy political editor, Tom Harwood, who's over at his video wall. Tom, what's going on?
Well, let's start all the way over here with the county councils, two of which have now declared. One really important, really interesting. We mentioned it earlier. It is Essex, which hasn't yet declared all of the seats on it, but Reform have won so many that even with only about 2/3 of those seats reporting, Reform have declared confidently that they have taken that council. What's interesting is that that's at the county council level, but if we zoom across to the district, borough or indeed unitary authority level and just look at all of these black splodges here within Essex, this is a no overall control indicator on our map, and this is because in these particular district councils there is not a full set of elections up. It's only a part set of elections. Reform have done very well, but of course that wouldn't be enough to overturn the majority on the council elected in thirds, as many of these places are. If we go up across the sort of east coast of the country, we can get to Hartlepool up here, where every single seat that was on offer to be elected went to the Reform Party, but again, it's a council elected in thirds, and so that goes into no overall control. It was once a red splodge. Now on our map, it's a black splodge. Very similar story in Hull, in North East Lincolnshire. Big Reform gains, pushing those councils into no overall control. And yet, on our map of district, borough and unitary authorities, the only Reform gain here is Newcastle under Lyme, where Reform has gained that council. All of the seats are up for being elected, and therefore they were able to push through. Some interesting places to note. Harlow, over here in Essex, the Conservatives have held on, and not just held on, they actually put on some seats. Something special is going on in Harlow for the Conservatives, pushing back against the trend of the wider area. Also down here in Fareham, which is the seat of Suella Braverman, former Conservative Home Secretary, now a Reform MP. Reform only managed to gain one seat in that area. The rest of them stayed Conservative. It looks like a patch of blue in an area where the surrounding area did lean Reform. So some curiosities there. But let's move across to London now, where, of course, we've had our first elected mayor. There are, of course, these peculiar borough-level elected mayors. It's a bit of a confusing system because, of course, there is a mayor for the whole of London, but some boroughs do directly elected mayors, most don't. But one of the ones that does is Hackney, which showed an overwhelming win for the Greens' Zoe Garbett. Now, Zoe Garbett won pretty much hands down, which does give us an indication that Hackney may well be the first borough to go Green, but we do have to wait for lots of those votes to be counted for the councillor level. One that did go Reform, of course, was Havering. Havering, many people who live in Havering consider themselves as basically living in Essex, so whether this is a true sort of London switch or not, big questions to be asked there. It is, of course, the area that Andrew Rossendale, the once Conservative, now Reform MP, represents as well. But interestingly, below Havering is Bexley, and Bexley was one that Reform thought they might take. Instead, the Conservatives have held it, and that brings us to a story of, closer we get into central London, some more Conservative successes. Conservatives gaining 7 seats on Westminster City Council. That's well over the 2 they needed to gain to flip it back to being Conservative from Labour. Conservatives have also gained considerably in Wandsworth, where they're only 1 seat away from controlling the council. Helpfully for the Conservatives, there is 1 independent on that council, a former Conservative. It looks like there will be a deal, and that will be a Conservative-led council. But one more curiosity here. Even though the Greens have done very well in Hackney and likely elsewhere in central London, the further out we go of London, we get to Richmond upon Thames here. here, deep Lib Dem territory. The Lib Dems have advanced in Richmond. They've gained 5 seats from the Green Party. And that's curious because the Green Party has advanced elsewhere, but they've retreated in Richmond. Now, some of that might be because there was a deal between the Greens and the Lib Dems not to stand against each other last time, but some of it also might be that where the Green Party have moved in terms of being a more radical left-wing party, a more party in the model of Jeremy Corbyn, one might say. Perhaps they've put off some of the leafier areas of the country. Perhaps they've put off some of the wealthier areas of the country that used to vote Green, like Richmond upon Thames. Ultimately, that's the map of England as we currently see it, but we are still waiting for those Scottish results to come in. They are counting the seats in Scotland. I wonder if we've got our Scottish map up here. Yes, we do. 129 seats need to be declared in Scotland, the vast majority of them individual constituency seats, and then top-up seats in these regions. Every Scot gets 2 votes, one for their local member and one for a party for these top-up seats in the regions. It's called an additional member system. It's the system that Wales used to have before they changed this time round. I wonder if we can see Wales, and there it is. Instead of this sort of 2-tier additional member system, all of members are being elected in regions in Wales. It might be that they're a little slower to declare because you don't get those initial constituency results. But we are hearing word that the First Minister of Wales, Anulad Morgan, is polling below the 12% threshold that would be necessary for her to keep her own seat. More as we get it.
Tom Harwood, our deputy political editor, but without a doubt our chief political cartography correspondent. He loves his maps, doesn't he? Thanks for that, Tom. Let's cross now to Christopher Hope, our political editor. Chris, a flurry of results to announce.
Yes, we have. And also, the first one from Scotland, as Tom was saying there, in Orkney, Lib Dems holding that. That's the first result from that count. Of course, that will float in number later today. Blackburn, Labour's lost control of Blackburn, no overall control now. Pressure from independents there, maybe a Gaza element too, and of course Reform UK. And in Manchester, now this is crucial for Labour, so not all bad news for Labour. They cannot lose control of this, but they could lose votes to Reform and Greens. That would be the concern for Labour have held Manchester. That's a relief for Andy Burnham, of course. He hopes to be maybe Prime Minister one day, but also, I think, to Keir Starmer too.
Talking about the independents, Christopher, which are very important in sort of like the ones we're expecting to hear, Manchester, Blackburn, Sheffield, those constituencies. The independents, how worried should all the main parties be about the rise of the independents and the fact that so many are campaigning on the Gaza ticket? Nothing to do with potholes or how local councils are being run, but they are gaining ground against all the main parties.
Well, it really affects Labour, really. The pressure's on them. It doesn't really affect the Tories. Maybe some Reform seats when they're going off those former Labour seats in the so-called Red Wall. But, yeah, concerning that this meant to be, frankly, a debate about potholes, council tax, bin collections. Why is Gaza involved in this? Because it's all about identity politics, sectarian politics, if you like. That's what increasingly we're hearing all the time is now part of our inner city politics.
On that point, Chris, I wonder if the main Labour winner from today is Shabana Mahmood, who has been fighting a bit of an internal battle in the Labour Party to say our main challenge is actually to the right, not to the left, not to the Greens, perhaps. And this is where we're going to lose the most of our votes. And she has been fighting a major... We heard Andrew Pakes there saying, you know, the government's working hard on immigration. The government has faced a lot of internal turmoil on its stance on immigration. Shabana Mahmood trying to change ILR rules and facing a battering from the backbenchers on that. Might this be an opportunity for her, more than, say, Andy Burnham, to say, it's my vision that offers the best restorative opportunity for the Labour Party?
Well, where is the fight? Is it to the left? Is it in the soft left space where Ed Miliband might take the party if he became leader? Or is it to the right where Reform UK is? And, of course, I think the scale of the win that's emerging now for Reform UK suggests that Shabana Mahmood is right. We've been polling members of the public today in London about what they think about Keir Starmer, and it's a mixed message. Here's what they told us.
Labour is doing well for the country, so I think he should just carry on doing what he's doing. And I think that sensible, politics will prevail, because I think at the moment what's happening in the country is very divisive, and I think he's the kind of leader who will pull people together, not reform.
I think he's really poor, just needs to get out of here.
I think he should resign because realistically he is a Conservative.
I think he means well, generally, but I think he has difficulty being assertive and acting, and I think overall he's been disappointing.
OK, Voices of London is disappointing, we heard there, that last voice. As Tom Harwood, our map man, was saying earlier, we're watching very closely London. I mean, the Greens could take Hackney, couldn't they, Tom? Islington, that's a Green target, so it could get a lot worse for Labour in London.
Also worth looking at Lambeth, Haringey, Newham and Camden as their targets as well, their stretch targets there in London.
And Tom, I want to pick up a point you made just a moment ago in front of your map on the side there, talking about how the Lib Dems were perhaps achieving more due to Green voters moving towards them, being pushed away by the more populist left-wing message that party is adopting. Do you think that might also support other parties that have been vying for support from sort of floating Green voters in the past? Might it help the Conservatives in some areas as well?
Yeah, I think without a doubt there has been a phenomenon of voters you might ordinarily think of as being fairly right-wing, maybe Cameroon-type Conservatives, centre-right individuals who care about the environment. And we have seen this in two of the seats that the Green Party won at the last general election, one in Suffolk and one in the West Country. Rural seats, previously Conservative, and then two of the seats that the Green Party won, they have four, two of the seats they won were urban, one Brighton and one right in the centre of Bristol. Now, these are two different competing forms of the Green Party, and interestingly, when Zach Polansky was standing to become leader of the Green Party, he was standing against a dual ticket of two people that represented the other side of the Green Party. So the Green Party that wanted to represent the countryside, perhaps a more traditional Conservative kind of voter, the Green Party has very much chosen instead to tack hard towards that sort of Corbynista version of the party, and that could well be putting off the sort of Samantha Cameron type who once voted for the Green Party.
I imagine, you think about one of those seats that they won at the last election, North Herefordshire. You can imagine the shift it's made now. Voters in North Herefordshire might not be on board with Zach Polansky's form.
OK, gentlemen, we have some breaking news coming in, so let's go straight to Meg Cope, our reporter in Wales, for us. Meg, what's the latest?
Hi, Dawn. Hi, Dawn. Hi, Charlie. Yes, well, here in Newport and Islwyn, counting is underway. It's a pretty important seat here as Reform UK leader Dan Thomas is standing. He's tipped to do pretty well here, actually, but it's also where a host of incumbent politicians hope to return to Cardiff Bay. I've just been speaking to Tory candidate Natasha Asghar, who's quite confident, but it's not looking good for the Tories here at all. Same with Labour. Welsh Government Housing Minister Jane Bryant hoping to retain her seat here. Now, back in 2021, in the last election, Welsh Labour dominated the vote here with about 46%, with Tories in second. Here, it's looking like Reform could get up to 3 seats out of the 6. Plaid Cymru even particularly could be getting 2 or 3 as well. Labour now just hoping for 1. Reform UK have really targeted this area in Newport because of its strong working class demographics as well as its Brexit voting demographics. So for Labour, this is the sort of seat that they traditionally rely on, but it's not looking good here at all. We'll bring you an update of the declaration. We're hoping around early afternoon.
OK, Meg, just want to add something to your report. Evidently, Labour have admitted defeat as the Deputy First Minister admits the party won't form the next Welsh Government now. That's just breaking.
Dawn. Yeah, they have conceded, exactly, and we're not allowed any interviews here from Labour, so I think that's why.
All right, interesting, Meg. We'll let you go and pursue those interviews if you can. We'll cross now to our political editor, Chris Soap. Bombshell news there.
That is huge. Let's just take a pause and think about what that means. Labour's been the largest party in every election since 1922. They've won every single devolved election since 1999. They are now declaring defeat in Wales. That means, as we know, it's a straight fight between Plaid and Reform. Reform have told my colleague Kathleen Forster in Wales that they think Plaid have won it, so Reform won't be the biggest party. But absolutely dramatic news here. Further pressure, as if there weren't enough already, on Prime Minister Keir Starmer.
Tom Hard, your reaction to this news that Labour has conceded defeat in Wales?
Well, they've faced up to reality. I think anyone that's looked at the polls in Wales, really, for the last 6 months, perhaps even more, will have thought this not just a possibility, but a probability. And in the last week or so, a near certainty. And yet, it is worth noting just what a seismic situation this is. Labour has had a vice-like grip on Wales, not just since devolution. Of course, when the first Welsh Assembly was there, we've only ever had a Welsh Assembly majority of Labour politicians and indeed a Welsh First Minister of the Labour Party. This is absolutely huge that there will not now be a Welsh First Minister of the Labour Party.
And we'll wait to see whether Lynn Morgan wins her seat. She may well not get the 12.5% you were saying there to hold that seat. Extraordinary.
And Chris will also see her reaction, because we've heard Anna Sarwar speaking months ago saying he'd like the Prime Minister to step down. Perhaps that message might also start to pop up in Wales.
Lynn Morgan didn't do that. Of course, Baroness Morgan, as she was, didn't go where Anna Sarwar did. While I've got you, by the way, the Greens have taken Labour, the Labour mayoralty of Birmingham. That is a big Metro Mayor story developing right now. And word out from Zach Polanski, we haven't heard from him yet today properly, the Green leader. He says his message to Keir Starmer is it's time to go. The country has rejected you.
Okay.
Interesting times indeed. Thank you so much for now, gentlemen. Let's cross to the other breaking story we have for you today, and that's Mark White in Dover. Mark, what's happening?
Well, a very significant and shocking milestone to confirm that 200,000 small boat migrants have crossed the English Channel illegally since this crisis began in 2018. That threshold was passed just after 11 a.m. this morning when the Border Force vessel Ranger arrived into Dover Harbour with another 70 migrants on board. That took us to give you a more exact figure, 200,013 since 2018. And of course, this is very uncomfortable reading for the Prime Minister, already reeling from a disastrous election day. And there's no doubt some will say that the elections that took place are, decided and judged on local issues. Yes, of course they are, but they are also a referendum on national policy, on the popularity of a leader, and particularly when it comes to issues like policy around the small boat crisis. We have Sir Keir Starmer, who entered office specifically saying he was going to do things differently to the Conservatives, that he was going to smash the gangs. But demonstrably, that hasn't happened, because in the almost 2 years that Labour have been in power, the numbers have continued to climb. Now, to be accurate, we can say that this year numbers are falling, but maritime security experts I've been speaking to say that this is very much to do with the fact that we've had significant runs of poor weather in the Channel, where the winds have just been too great and also blowing from the north to make crossing days very rare. But there is, I think, an issue to give the government some credit. Perhaps we're seeing that there are supply issues, because on some days when we expect significant numbers of crossings, we're not quite seeing that. The government does believe that that's because they are disrupting some of the supply chains. We won't know that until later in the year, because when we get into the really flat calm conditions of the summer, the 35% reduction in where we were last year can close within the space of a week or so. So we'll just have to wait until a bit later in the year before trying to determine what the cause for the slight decrease in numbers crossing the Channel this year has been. But there's no doubt, as I say, more than 71,000 have crossed under Sir Keir Starmer's tenure in number 10. And that is 71,000, of course, too many.
Mark White, our Home and Security Editor down in Dover. As you can see, It's glorious weather, and that is the main deterrent that Mark White keeps reporting on. When the weather's bad, there's no crossings, and when he stands there in the sun, we know what's coming.
Exactly.
Right, well, in an earlier discussion on the point, we just got to refer to this. We should point out that Care for Calais have always denied providing any assistance to people seeking to cross the Channel and have said they focus only on providing humanitarian aid.
OK, let's cross live to Hackney now, where they have the first Green Mayor. Sam Francis is there with the latest for us. Sam.
Yeah, hello again to you both. Well, this is one of the 6 mayoral elections taking place here today, or should I say results we're expecting to hear. Labour and the Greens really pitting against themselves. It is a 5-way race, or was a 5-way race before the result was announced, but we now know that the Greens have securely won the electoral seat for mayor here in Hackney. And we've just been hearing, in fact, from the Green Party leader, Zach Polansky, who is increasingly hopeful today that the mayoral vote will be a sign and signal of what's yet to come here, with 57 council seats also up for grabs later today. Around 5 o'clock, we're expecting to hear the results, the full results for all of those seats. 50 currently held by Labour after the 2022 local election, 5 for the Conservatives, 2 for Greens. So we're waiting to see if the Greens can buck the trend and follow exactly how they have done in the mayoral election with these council seats. Now, I'll just bring you a few lines that we heard from Zach Polansky in the last few minutes. As I say, increasingly hopeful that the Greens may continue to outperform Labour significantly here. He said that he is determined to hold the Labour government to account, saying that Sir Keir Starmer's time is up, a line we have heard repeatedly from him and a number of other politicians in recent weeks. And he also says that Starmer needs to go because people have lost trust and they are sick of the level of entitlement of the Westminster elite. I believe we can, in fact, take a quick listen to just some of the comments that Zach Polansky, party leader of the Greens, had to say a few minutes ago.
This is a historic victory. This is the first time the Green Party have ever won a directly elected mayor. And two-party politics is not just dying, it is dead and it is buried. And actually, whether it's here that Labour have been rejected or whether we're seeing around the country, it's very clear that the new politics is the Green Party versus Reform. I said that the Green Party were going to replace Labour. That's exactly what we did in Gorton and Denton. It's what we've done in Hackney, and we're seeing that right across the country. In fact, in almost all of our seats right across the country, whether they're target or non-target, the Green Party vote share is rising.
So a defiant Zach Polansky there, certainly buoyed up by the result of that mayoral election. And it's worth noting that turnout is a significant factor here on just how these 57 seats will be decided later today. We are already 7% up, according to the figures that I've just received. 40.98% of people turning out to vote here in wards across the borough of Hackney. That is just around 185,000 votes, and they are behind me now being counted and will be continuing to count throughout the rest of this afternoon into around 5 o'clock as we expect the results to come through. For now, though, the question, does Hackney remain a Labour stronghold? The mayoral result clearly suggesting it may not be that way. Or will the momentum for the Greens turn out to be a winning day for them today?
OK, Sam Francis in Hackney, thank you so much. I mean, the Zoe Garbutt, who is the new mayor, the first Green mayor, she won 35,720 votes. Her Labour rival, Caroline Woodley, was a long way behind, which, Christopher Hope, does make you question whether Labour are going to lose Hackney altogether.
Well, all eyes on that one. That is so important to Diane Abbott, you know, the mother of the House of Commons. Of course, she is the MP for Hackney. Zach Polansky there saying that two-party politics is not just dying, it's dead and buried. And what did Nigel Farage say at 8 a.m. this morning? There's no more left-right, it's gone out the window, it's finished. These challenger parties are pronouncing the end of the politics we have known all our lives, going back a century or more, of these two main parties duking it out for power in this country. Reform and the Greens have a different answer to that.
Christopher, do you think this is just a blip because we have had a fairly terrible Conservative government and a very terrible Labour government? Do you think it will ever go back to the two-party system?
Well, I wonder.
Could that two parties be Reform and Green?
Well, it could be. But yes, I mean, you'd say that the Tories are the oldest party in the world, and they've got a kind of history of reinventing themselves, shedding their skin like a snake, and pushing forward in a new identity, whether that's pro or anti. tax or immigration, whatever it might be. The issue with the two challenger parties is they are built around the charisma of one individual, Zach Polansky or Nigel Farage, and when those two are scrutinised, they don't like it much, and they can be found wanting in some quarters. So that is the problem they've got. Who else? Who are you voting for? We don't have a presidential system. We have a parliamentary system where you have a team around him. Who is the team around Farage? Not many MPs. Who's around Zach Polansky? Frankly, who knows? And that's the problem.
I suppose, Chris, both parties would respond to that, the Greens and Reform, by saying, well, here we are building that team.
Correct.
These local elections are an opportunity for them to actually expand those personalities, the number of people that we see front and centre representing those parties wearing those rosettes. And we could perhaps start to look at this party less as insurgent challengers, but increasingly part of the establishment.
And yet at the election, Charlie, they won't have more than a dozen or so MPs if they win all the by-elections that happen between now and then. So we'll be
maybe just one member of the House of Lords.
Well,
of course.
one member of the House of Lords. So we are facing a huge shot in the dark for this country. And as scrutiny approaches the election, the other parties, the two main parties with history behind them, will be pushing on that.
And yet this is where the devolved administrations come in. It could be that we get an official opposition in Wales that is the Reform Party. We might even, and I think this is less likely, but we might even get an official opposition in Scotland that is of the Reform Party. That's every single week the leader of the Reform Party in Scotland questioning the First Minister of Scotland, holding them to account, becoming again part of the establishment and building up those profiles of not just being local councillors, but actually elected parliamentarians. And we will, whatever happens, see several dozen elected Reform parliamentarians.
I think that might suit Reform. I don't think they're ready for power in Wales or Scotland. In fact, I've been told that by senior figures in Reform, certainly in Wales, they don't really want to win that much. Were they the biggest party and then applied a second Reform, a grouping to stop them winning power, then that would also win.
The dream scenario for Reform is coming first, but not enough to govern. However, it does look, according to the polls at least, that Plaid may well come first, Reform second. We still have to see those results.
Chris, talking about that dream scenario that Tom just mentioned there, I was hearing your analysis earlier. The problem that Reform might have come 2029 is that 29-30% ceiling doesn't allow for a landslide. The way they might be able to win over more voters who aren't sure about Reform, who aren't from the traditional Labour switchers or Conservative switchers, is perhaps to be in that role in opposition, where they can actually fight for people who won't normally vote that way.
Holding to account. And you're right, 29% we think is the vote share. We think it's, although we haven't got all the votes in, 29% of what they've won this time. That's the same as Gorton and Denton by-election. Is that the ceiling? Peter Kellner, the well-respected pollster, he is saying that, in fact, they're doing less well than they did last year's local elections, and that's a problem for Reform UK. That was denied by Lee Anderson earlier. He said, no, we haven't reached the ceiling at all. But they need to get to 32% to win a majority in an election.
Really interesting to look at the places where Reform have not won so far. So Harlow, Fareham, the central parts of London, where the Tories are hanging on, they are indexing higher for income. They have more shops like Gales. They have they're frankly leafier, posher areas. It looks like Reform is winning over more traditional blue-collar areas. Can they push through to the more white-collar areas? That remains to be seen.
OK, we have heard from all the party leaders now, I'm correct in saying, aren't I? Starmer saying he won't walk away, Farage hailing a historic shift, Kemi Badenoch saying it's a good strategy, takes time, and Lib Dem saying, well, does anyone actually... No, the Lib Dems aren't getting talked about still, are they?
No, they're still the observers. They observe what's going on. The problem for me has long been they define themselves against things. Brexit, Farage, Trump, but not for anything. They have these local champions with no real clear policy offering there.
On that point, they keep talking about Sir Ed Davies' personal story as a carer, and that's what I hear that all the time. And
to his credit, I mean,
and it is very powerful. But if you ask the same people who hear that message, what is the Lib Dem policy on care? Perhaps they don't know. Because whenever I hear from the Lib Dems, and it's all the time, of course, it's often stuff, Dawn, about we are against the King going to the United States of America, which has been obviously a highly successful visit for the King and for the United Kingdom in general. But I don't hear the same powerful pronouncements that they put all their focus into, perhaps. wider policy.
But they have done well. They held all the seats in Richmond-upon-Thames, winning 5 from the Greens after a deal they did in 22 stopped happening. They held Eastleigh. They won Sutton from the Conservatives. They are a party of local champions, but that doesn't present a national offering.
Interesting. We'll leave this hour on that note, that the Lib Dems concentrate on local areas, local problems, unlike the Green Party, who seem to concentrate on Gaza.
Well, you've had other things too, and legalising hard drugs and other policies too, which you may disagree with, Dawn.
And of course, their policies on immigration coming under a lot of scrutiny now. I think what Tom was saying earlier about those floating voters out of the metropolitan areas who voted Green at the last general election. North Herefordshire is going to be such an interesting seat at the next general election. You know, they unseated Sir Bill Wiggin there, a legacy Conservative. The voters who switched from the Tories to the Greens, what will they think about the legalised heroin, open borders and genocide?
It looks like they're walking away, Charlie. It looks like they're not happy about it.
OK, they are appealing to young women. If it's just women 18 to 50 to vote, Zach Zelensky would be our next Prime Minister.
What do you think? gbnews.com/your say. Do get in touch with us.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 1 o'clock on Friday, the 8th of May. I'm Dawn Neeson.
And I'm Charlie Peters.
And I'm Tom Harwood.
I'm not going to walk away from those challenges and plunge the country into chaos.
The Prime Minister vows not to quit as he takes responsibility for Labour's abysmal local council results so far. The party is facing a local wipeout across England.
Yeah, that's more than 50 of the 136 council results in so far. The party appears to be losing grip of its historic heartlands, with major losses in Tameside, Hartlepool and Wigan, as pollsters predict Labour could lose 1,500 council seats.
And there's further misery for the Prime Minister as the number of migrants who have illegally crossed to the Channel by small boat has surpassed 200,000 since 2018.
And meanwhile, Nigel Farage says the best is yet to come as Reform UK makes major gains in traditional Labour and Conservative territory, with victories already declared in key battlegrounds.
Labour are being wiped out by Reform in many of their most traditional areas, and what you're going to see later on today is the Conservative Party being wiped out in their heartlands like Essex.
Elsewhere, Reform UK has gained control of Essex County Council from the Conservatives.
Reform UK say it's over for the Tories across the country. Are they right? Certainly in Essex, they are history.
Labour is doing well for the country, so I think he should just carry on doing what he's doing.
I think he should resign because realistically he is a Conservative.
I think he's really poor, just needs to go, get out of here.
We said Conservatives are coming back, and here we are.
And it's been a mixed night for the Tories, losing 195 seats, but they have taken Westminster City Council back from Labour.
He's doing a fantastic job. He's led our party to become the largest it has ever been in the party's history. I love working side by side with Ed. We make a strong leadership team, but he is the right person to lead us into the next election.
And the Lib Dems have gained 32 seats and celebrate that they are heading for their 8th set of local election gains in a row.
That I know Zoe Garbett as Mayor of Hackney, and in fact so many people who run councils or indeed Green councillors will be holding the government to account from a local level to say it's outrageous that decades of austerity have stripped councils of funding.
Meanwhile, Zach Zelensky's Green Party has had a huge victory in London, with its candidate elected Mayor of Hackney ousting Labour.
Up in Birmingham, things are looking up for the Reform Party. We'll be live there throughout the afternoon.
Yeah, we've only had 5 of the wards out of 101 announced so far already, but Reform have gained 2 seats from Labour, and the Greens have made a gain from Labour as well, unseating the Lord Mayor in this city. I'll have the latest from the Utilita Arena.
Well, we'll be totting up all of these results as they come in, filling up this map. 5,000 council seats to be declared in England. We've only had about 1,500 of them so far, but also, of course, those seat maps in Scotland and Wales too. It's all to come.
So thank you so much for your company on a seismic day in British politics. And please do remember, we would love your opinion on all the stories that are breaking today. gbnews.com/your say is your way to join in the conversation and have your say on what you're witnessing in your area and across the country. Or you can indeed scan the QR code.
I have to say, Dawn, the comments have been coming thick and fast. I've barely managed to read, actually, to keep up with how fast they're coming in. One did come in saying, has Tom Harwood had 3 espressos today? I think he's possibly had 4.
Oh, I think there's been some caffeine in the Coca-Cola that I've been drinking. I've been doing this since 6 a.m, but my goodness me, there's some more hours to go. We haven't yet had the most exciting moment of the results yet. Yeah. So, you know, the more results come in, the more hyperactive I may become.
More coffee and
more
Coca-Cola
hyperactive, a hyperactive Tom Harwood. That's just
birthday,
scary.
Christmas and New Year all rolled into one for him, that's for sure.
OK, now Labour has admitted a crushing defeat in Wales, one of the biggest stories of the day so far, after suffering disastrous local election results in England overnight.
While speaking in Ealing in West London, the Prime Minister said it had been a tough night for his party.
I think it's very important that we don't sugarcoat these results, so I'm not going to do that. They are tough results, I accept that. They reflect voters who don't feel that their lives have changed enough or quickly enough, and that's been going on for a long time. We were elected to deal with that, and I'm not going to walk away from that responsibility and plunge the country into chaos.
Here comes as Reform UK makes major gains across England, having won control of Essex County Council. Nigel Farage has held a historic shift in British politics.
Labour are being wiped out by Reform in many of their most traditional areas, and what you're going to see later on today is the Conservative Party being wiped out in their heartlands like Essex.
Well, it very much looks like it could be the end of two-party politics in the United Kingdom. Let's cross over now to our political editor, Christopher Hope, very quickly for an update. Chris, what's the latest?
Well, it really is. Now, we're seeing a rearguard action to defend Keir Starmer. Steve Reid, of course, the local government secretary, he's out and about, and shortly, I think, on GB News, he's been giving remarks elsewhere saying this, that doom-scrolling through Prime Ministers doesn't resolve the problem. I think that's a rather good way of communicating the problem that this party has got, that Keir Starmer is not connecting with the base, is not connecting with voters, and it's not working. And it feels the change they promised on the front page of their manifesto in July 2024 simply has not been delivered. Now, things have happened to this government that were out of their control, the war in Iran and other things too, but some of it is created. I mean, they have created this tax burden that wasn't there. They pledged not to increase taxes and then did so. There are problems with, of course, with U-turning on about 12 different policy areas. It does seem an issue of competence, I think, is what voters are judging this government on.
OK, Christopher, thank you so much for now. Christopher will be throughout the programme with us, breaking all the live stories for us. OK, joining us now is Labour's Housing Secretary, Steve Reid. Mr Reid, thank you so much for joining us today. Firstly, how are you feeling right now?
Well, slightly tired after a long night and a lot of steps yesterday, but of course, you know, it's been a tough night. If you're looking at the results that are still coming in, and there's no point trying to say anything other than that. I've been involved in politics a long time. I was a council leader myself. I know a lot of the councillors, and I feel really sorry for really hard-working people that have lost their seats tonight. So every lesson, I've always thought this, every election teaches you something you need to know, and we need to reflect and learn from what the voters have just told us so that we can focus better on meeting their aspirations as a government.
Steve Reid, do you feel sorry for those Labour councillors who've lost their seats because you think it's actually through no fault of their own? Many of these local politicians doing a great job in their wards, but they're being punished due to a wider dislike of the Labour government and indeed the Labour leadership.
Well, there's always multiple factors involved in local elections. You know, I won a local election myself, as you'll know, when I was a council leader. We won the council from opposition and went into power completely against the run of play because we focused on the right local issues. And indeed, knocking on doors, as I've done an awful lot over recent weeks, it's very often local issues that people will refer to. But of course, there's a national context too. So it's a mixture of both of those things, if I'm really honest.
Steve, we keep coming back to the same problem here. Labour has a Keir Starmer problem. People would vote for Labour, and this is anecdotal on the doorsteps this morning, talking to people. People would vote for Labour if it wasn't for Keir Starmer. Why is your leader so unpopular?
Well, you know, I just heard Chris Hopper there using a phrase that I've said earlier on. We don't want to go doom scrolling through leader after leader. The Conservatives tried that. Between 2016 and 2024, when they lost, they had 5 different prime ministers, 7 chancellors, 9 education secretaries. It didn't resolve the problem. It actually just meant that the economy flatlined, public services didn't improve, and they got their worst result in their entire 200 years of history.
So you are backing him for the next general election, Steve Reid. You're backing Sir Keir Starmer for the next election.
Yes, I am. He's the right man to lead us through. He was the man who won us that great big majority in 2024. But also, we've seen what happens to parties when they do what the Conservatives did and just keep switching through prime ministers rather than focusing on delivering the change the public wants to see. Now, I've spoken to a lot of people on their doorsteps. I know people are feeling disappointed and frustrated. I know they're impatient for change. They want their wages to go up through the economy doing better. They want their high streets to look better. There's too many of them are run down and shabby today. They want change that they can feel in their communities, but we don't deliver that by keeping on changing the guy at the top. You deliver it by driving through the agenda we were elected to deliver. My job is to get more homes built. Last year, this government built more social and council homes than any other government in 35 years. People don't feel all of that change yet. We've got to keep on making the change until people perceive it in their own lives and in their own communities.
Yeah, but you're talking about perception, Steve. People are living a reality, and the reality is they are feeling worse off. They're not optimistic about the future. They have a real issue with Keir Starmer, and they are voting, in many cases, for either the Greens or Reform. Yeah, which way should Labour jump? Which way are you going to be more powerful now? Do you move more to the left or do you move more to the right? You're hemorrhaging on both sides.
Well, my view is we shouldn't lurch to the left or to the right. We should lurch towards the communities that British people are part of. I think we need to focus much more on the places people belong to. I see this in politics, not just in this country, but abroad as well. Joe Biden did it. Politicians standing up and talking about billions of investment in this, that or the other. What does it mean for somebody's hometown? You've got to make change real for where people live, for their family, for their home, on their doorstep, in their high street, in their workplace. And I don't think we've focused enough on that. We talk too strategically. We don't talk in terms that make sense to ordinary people. So we have to do that. But at the same time, it's not just about talk. There has to be real change in people's lives. We're starting to see it. You know, we brought in the Renters' Rights Act, came into force just last week. That change has happened, but it's not going to be affecting a lot of people's lives yet. They'll feel it as we move forward over coming months, and that's the case with many of the policies that we're delivering as a government.
Steve, you have been in power now for almost 2 years, and voters are feeling change brought in by the Labour Party. I know you mentioned one that's only come in last week, but 2 years is quite a long time to make a lot of change already, and the results we're seeing at the moment seems to suggest that people do want a different person inside the building on our screens right now, and that's number 10 Downing Street. As we're currently looking after these results, do you think that Nigel Farage is now much more likely to become the next Prime Minister?
I think there is a real threat that Nigel Farage could become Prime Minister, but that will be determined by whether or not this government can deliver the change the British public want to see. I don't think the public obsess about personalities in the way that, to be honest, politicians can do in Westminster or the media does. They want change in their lives. When I was knocking on doors, very, very rarely did people mention Keir Starmer to me. They would point to potholes. They would talk about their local high street. They would talk about the cost of housing. It's the real changes in people's lives they want to see. In some cases I was able to point to change. I was speaking to one guy who was a pensioner, whose pension had just gone up £550 last month. That's a big change that we're making. Or people seeing £100 cut in their energy bill. It's a start. It's not enough. We've got to keep on going until people really feel their lives are better. That is how we tackle the parties to our right or left that, if we don't do a good enough job, will come in and seek to take away that support.
Steve, just quickly and finally, you talk about personality. The two parties challenging you, the Green and Reform, they've got very, very strong personalities as leader, but you could argue there's not much substance behind them, and yet they are actually thumping you in most of the country.
Well, I think people are frustrated and people are angry. If you look at the normal 5-year terms of a parliament, these elections that come after 2 years, the ruling party tends to do badly. Now, that would normally happen by people going out and voting for the main opposition party. There's still too much anger with the Conservatives, so some people have voted for the Greens, some people have voted for Reform. But we hear them, we hear their anger, we hear their frustration, and we are determined to drive change faster, because that is what the British people expect of us.
OK, Labour Housing Secretary Steve Reed, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. OK, yeah, now it's time for our poll of the day. If you haven't had enough of polls, we've got another one for you. This is the two-party system dead? Yes or no? Simply scan the QR code on your screen or visit gbnews.com. Right, please do vote in that. But let's cross over now to our national reporter, Jack Carson, who joins us live from Birmingham. Jack, what's going on at the moment? The counting has been going up. Is there any results to come shortly?
Well, we've had the first 5 results here out of 101 set to be elected onto Birmingham City Council today. It is a full council election. Let me run through the picture that we have currently at the moment. Reform are up 2 seats, taking 2 seats off Labour. Labour also losing a seat to the Green Party as well. Reform managing to unseat the former leader of Birmingham City Council, Ian Ward, and the Green Party unseating the current Lord Mayor of Birmingham too. Let's go to some reaction with Deputy Leader of Reform UK, Richard Tice. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. What are your feelings in Birmingham? Are you going to take this council?
Let's wait and see. It's incredibly close. Every seat it's like a 3 or 4 way marginal, and we're delighted overall, but it's way too early to call. What I will say, as a general trend, we're doing very well. The Greens are doing a bit better than was thought, and Labour are doing a lot worse than was expected. That's the sort of the overall mix, and then you've got independents. So this is unique, truly unique. But elsewhere in the West Midlands, Reform have absolutely smashed it. From Newcastle under Lyme to Tamworth to Nuneaton, Cannock, Dudley, it's remarkable.
But here, do you think you're going to be able to get a majority? And if not, would you be open to working with the Conservatives here to get Labour out of power?
Let's wait and see. Common sense needs to prevail, and we hope that that's what voters ultimately, that as they get counted, that's what it'll show. But it's way too close to call. You could have 3 or 4 parties in the high 20s, for example. We just don't know.
What would your plan be for Birmingham? Is it bin strikes first?
Run it properly, stop wasting money. We can sort out the bin strike, I've no doubt about that, and start actually getting some value for money for the services provided. And I think that's ultimately what residents want. And we have to bear that in mind, is that this is actually about local issues, and elsewhere we've already demonstrated that in the councils that we've run, we've been doing a great job saving money, providing better services. Take Newcastle under Lyme. We won that in its entirety. That's within Staffordshire that we won last year. So voters are doubling down, saying thank you very much, Reform councillors, for what you've done so far, and yes, we're going to give you an extra chance to do even better, even more. That's a sign of confidence, of progress, which we're very grateful for.
What are you currently thinking about other areas? Coventry, Walsall, places like that. Do you have plans if you were to gain control of those councils?
Of course, it's the same principles. Apply a business-like attitude. Make sure you're not being ripped off. Make sure you're getting value for money. Can you deliver a better service for a lower cost? Those are all the sort of things that we're elsewhere we can do. In Lancashire, we've almost got rid of the whole of the send backlog in County Durham, for example. We're bringing children in care back in-house, investing more in care for in adult social care, getting better value down in Kent. In Derbyshire, I think we've got rid of vast majority of the pothole backlog. And here's a patriotic piece of exciting news. You know, we're buying more JCB pothole pros manufactured not far from here. I mean, look at new British technology, stronger mastic and sort of the glue, the bitumen that holds the potholes together, lasts longer, fills in smaller cracks. These are all the great British inventions we're delivering in these councils.
But if you were to gain control of this council today, many residents will want to know how you're going to end the bin strikes as soon as possible. It's been an all-out strike since March last year. So Labour 10 days ago said that they'd got a deal done with Unite. They were ready to go and end these strikes. How quickly are you going to be able to? Because they're committing to a compensation scheme for drivers.
Well, let me tell you, it's taken Labour at least a year to get this sorted out. A reform-led negotiation, I am very confident we'll be able to sort this out and ensure that residents, that the bins are collected, that the rubbish is collected, the streets are a lot cleaner, and just driving around, we've got to fill a huge quantity of potholes because the state of the roads around Birmingham, frankly, are a disgrace.
Richard Tice, thank you so much for joining us here at the Birmingham count. Of course, as I was saying, the first 5 of 101 wards have been announced today. It is an all-out election, so we're going to be looking into the early evening until we get a proper picture about what this council makeup is going to be come tomorrow morning.
All right, Jack Carson, thank you very much for that summary interview, of course, with Richard Tice. Let's cross now to Christopher Hope, our political editor, for a bit of a roundup of all the latest developments. Chris.
Yeah, nothing more coming in on the results. Blackburn with Darwin, Labour have lost, according to the BBC, but no party majority there. Richard Tice there saying Wales is looking very too close to call. I mean, watching Wales really and how that develops, that would be the story, I think, on the front page of tomorrow's papers as the English councils fade a bit from view. But, yeah, I mean, I think Reform can't quite believe what's been happening here. We're looking now at a graphic there with councils looking, I think, at total council loss there. 11, Labour down 11, and left with 11, so Labour down 9, Tories down 2, Reform up 3. Of course, these are the councils they've won, so although they're winning a lot more seats than this, in many of the cases, as Tom Harwood was saying before, they're no overall control. So we can say there that Reform have gained 3 councils, Labour down 11, Tories down 6, those who can't see it, Lib Dem still on 8, up 1, and the others no change. So, the overall control hasn't changed that much. Reform up 3, and the main parties there losing control of 17 councils. Charlie and Dawn.
OK, let's just bring Tom Harwood into this conversation. Tom, you've been manning the boards all night, colouring, not all night, but all morning, certainly colouring in your black blobs, mainly. A lot of councils are going to be hung councils now. No overall control.
That's certainly true. And one thing to watch when it comes to these hung councils is what deals are being made and what might that tell us about the next Parliament in Westminster. Might it be that locally Conservatives and Reform unite the right and start working together to form an administration to lock out the Labour Party or indeed the Greens and Lib Dems? If that starts to happen, then could you start to think about what happens in the next Parliament and whether that will then lead to that sort of uniting of the right? One more thing, in Scotland, it looks like the Greens think they're going to take some constituency seats for the first ever time, particularly in Glasgow. One thing to watch there with the Greens in Scotland.
Very interesting, absolutely. OK, talking of the Green Party, they have secured their first ever mayoral win in Hackney in London today. Joining us now is Green Party member John Grant. John, good to see you. Firstly, just have your reaction to congratulations, the first Green mayor in London.
Yes, that's fantastic news, isn't it? Somebody that's actually listening to the people, and they people have voted for such a wonderful person as well.
And John, you say that people they're listening to the people, the Green Party. I'd just like to play you a clip from one of the electoral announcements this morning. Have a listen to this.
Assalamu alaikum. আমি সবাইকে অনুরোধ জানাচ্ছি আমার বাংলাদেশি কমিউনিটি যারা এই নিয়মে বসবাস করেন সবাইকে.
Now, John, is that listening to the people or is that engaging in foreign or sectarian politics, making a announcement after an electoral victory in foreign language?
Well, yeah, I mean, I can't speak for them. I'm not a spokesperson for the Green Party. But
how do you feel about it as a Green Party member, John?
Well, yeah, I mean, I didn't understand a word what he said. So, you know, that to me seems like a poor way of communicating in the UK, where English is our language. You know, that's fair to say. And, you know, it does make me a little uncomfortable. I can't deny, like I said, it's not ideal, that's for sure. But there are a lot of people with a second language, you know, that isn't, for it to be delivered first in a second language seems odd. But I'd like to know some more context with regards to that, really.
John, why do you think the Green Party have done so well in these local elections?
Well, I mean, this has not just happened. You know, I've been with them for nearly 20 years, and we've been building a baseline of this idea that the environment and social good are connected. And as Labour has moved more to the right, we've sort of managed to communicate that we are hopeful about the future, rather than selling fear and rage and derision. This idea that maybe we could head forwards in a positive way, making the working people's lives a little bit better.
John, you say you've been a member for a long time, 20 years. It's great to hear from you and your perspective on this, because, of course, the party has also changed a lot in the time that you've been a member, particularly under the leadership of Zach Polanski. You say that the party's against rage and division. Several candidates were suspended due to alleged anti-Semitism. That is appearing to be a growing problem in the party, as it's not only looking at sort of foreign and sectarian politics, but increasingly concerned with conflicts in the Middle East. Do you think that the Green Party is potentially at risk of losing sight of its core message, the environment?
Well, I mean, you can have a number of central policies, and the idea of being anti a country does not make you anti-Semitic. Let's make that absolutely clear. That you know, you can have two truths. That you can believe that the actions in Palestine are follow the world courts on all of this, and that there are some awful things going on, and you don't have to be anti-Jewish. I mean, the Green Party's got the only Jewish leader as in control of it. So this idea of anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism or anti-Israel, really we need to pull that apart. That, you know, you absolutely don't. I see wonderful Jewish people in the Palestine marches here in Sheffield every Friday when they stand there. So it isn't, you know, but it is difficult that people can lose their temper and get very frustrated, and people
say racist things, of course, yes.
You know, and you can't control everybody, and there are extreme people on the left and on the right which are terrifying.
Okay.
I can't deny.
And John, just quickly and finally, do you think those people should be expelled from the party?
If you're anti-Semitic, absolutely. If you're acting with the world courts on human rights, absolutely no. But you know, it comes down to my party's decision and the process, which is very specific on this. They do not ignore things like I see the ignoring of really awful actions by certain politicians and such
John,
like. So
we have
I'm pleased to see that.
Okay.
John, we have run out of time on Fun Show. It's Green Party member John Grantner. Thank you so much for joining us today.
I mean, it is disputed that they are acting quickly. I mean, the reporter who's done so much on this, Andrew Gilligan, looking through those candidates, said that a lot of the time he was going to the party with concerns about candidates and it was just being ignored.
Yeah.
Anyway,
okay.
there we go.
Let's go now to former Liberal Democrat councillor Matthew Hulbert. Matthew, good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're talking about almost every other party at the moment apart from the Liberal Democrats. Why is that?
Well, hi, Dawn and Charlie. I can't believe you're not talking about us. We are also having a really good night, day, whatever you want to call it. So you need to start talking about us. So really quickly, we've taken Stockport Council and Portsmouth Council. We've had our best ever result in Sutton, 51 of 55 councillors. That's 22 gains. And in Richmond, get this right, we've taken every single seat, 54 councillors, taking 5 seats off the Greens. I bet Zach Polanski doesn't tweet about that. I bet there's no mention of that in his social media. So the Lib Dems are doing very well. You need to talk about us more.
You sound quite angry about Zach Palensky there, Matthew. Why is that?
Oh, I know Zach of old. I remember him about 11 years ago, Dawn, in the Lib Dems, praising the austerity-enforcing coalition when I was going on TV, saying that Nick Clegg was doing the wrong thing. So he's had quite a turnaround, Zach Palensky, hasn't he? In fact, he didn't just talk about his praise for the coalition, he sang it at Lib Dem conference. I was there. I was in the auditorium. So is he really an eco-socialist, or is this all a bit of an act? I'm not sure.
A bit fake, do you think, Matthew?
Well, well, look, I mean, you have to be careful what you say about people, but all I can say is that those weren't his views 11 years ago. Now, 11 years is a long time. Maybe he's had a Damascene conversion to Corbyn-style socialism. I don't know, but all I do know is that the Lib Dems might not be glitzy, we might not be kind of loudmouth, we might not be in your face, but actually, if you want a good local champion who'll do the hard yards and the hard grind and who'll work for you on the council, you can't choose better than a Lib Dem.
Matthew, is your sort of opposition to Zach Palensky perhaps also coming from a position of jealousy? Because you say that the Lib Dems aren't necessarily glitzy and loud, but at the same time, they're also not necessarily performing at the same level as the Green Party surge that we are witnessing. Critics of your party say the Greens stand for something, the Lib Dems just appear to stand against things. What's your response to that claim?
Well, I'll make a prediction here, Dawn and Charlie, and you can play this back to me in future years if it doesn't happen. But I think British liberalism will still be here when reform has imploded. I predict that will happen. You just wait. And when the Greens have gone back to the political fringes, Lib Dems, like the cockroaches that Tim Farron says we are, will still be here, still representing people, still pointing at potholes, still wearing sandals, will still be here.
And Matthew, who do you think? I mean, lots of predictions today that the next Prime Minister is going to be Nigel Farage. It's not going to be Sir Ed Davey. It's going to be Nigel Farage. Lots of extremely well-respected political commentators are saying that. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I mean, I think you can imagine what my reaction to that is, Dawn, but this is a family show, and so I won't say exactly what I'm thinking on air, because I think I'll be told off. Look, his politics are clearly very different from mine. What can I tell you? I mean, you know, I'm a liberal, I'm a plural, I'm an internationalist, dare I say it on this network, I'm even a pro-European. And so quite clearly, a Farage administration would be pretty difficult for me. But I can tell you what, the Lib Dems will still be there, maybe even if the official opposition holding him to account.
OK, Matthew Holbert, former Liberal Democrat councillor and self-described cockroach. Pleasure to have your company this afternoon. Let's cross over now to our deputy political editor, Tom Harwood. Tom, what's the latest with you and your map?
Yes, just going to start with England. There are some statistics that you might be interested in. The Green Party is, of course, up 50 seats so far, and we haven't yet had all of the declarations, far from it. But despite being up 50 seats, the Green Party has actually lost 30% of the seats it was defending. So it's gained a lot of seats, but also lost some seats. Now, this could be some of what we were discussing earlier about this shift of where the Green Party is finding its vote. Just as the Liberal Democrat vote doesn't particularly overlap to the last time that the Liberal Democrat vote peaked, where it peaked in 2005 in the midst of the furore over the Iraq War. The Liberal Democrat Party took student areas and took Muslim areas. These days, the Liberal Democrat Party represents leafy and wealthy areas. It feels like the Lib Dems and the Greens have almost swapped electorates, because now we find the Green vote shifting towards those younger, poorer and very often ethnic minority areas, whereas it is retreating from areas like Richmond upon Thames, as we were discussing, with those 5 Green losses to the Liberal Democrats. So some interesting shifts across the wider picture. But of course, it's been a good day for the Greens in Hackney. They're expecting to win many councillors here. They're hoping to get a lot of gains in Lambeth as well, and in Southwark. Some of these areas of central London is where the Green Party is looking to advance most precipitously. But my goodness me, it looks like the excitement is turning from England towards Scotland. So let's skip over a lot of the reform gains that we've seen, because we've We've seen hundreds of them here, and we've spoken about it a lot of the afternoon so far. Let's go to Scotland, because we've started to see some declarations there north of the border. Here we have Orkney and Shetland coloured in. Orkney going to the Liberal Democrats. Shetland looks like it's gone to the SNP there. We've had some more SNP declarations. These are the constituency seats of the Scottish Parliament. Now, this is how the electoral system works. Basically, there are 73 seats across Scotland that are individual constituency seats that work on a first-past-the-post basis. But then to make the system proportional, in addition to that, there are 56 extra seats that are done on a regional basis. And basically what happens within a region is a complicated mathematical formula called the d'Hondt formula, where seats are the total vote of a party. Basically, the seats are subtracted from that vote using a complicated formula that then delivers a proportional top-up system of seats in the regions. Now, this is where we're likely to see the most reform pickups in these regional votes. It's a peach-coloured ballot paper as opposed to the other colour. What is it? Sort of. It's a sort of pinkish colour, but I'm not sure. Maybe it's a greenish colour. Anyway, this is the map of Scotland so far. We're starting to see some of those safest seats come in on the constituencies, but it won't be until a little bit later that we see those regional results pick through. But we're starting to see that little bit of colour. Reform say if they've had a very, very good day, they might have one constituency, but they're expecting most of their seats to be there in the regional vote. Now, finally, Wales. Wales is still waiting on a single declaration. It's going to take longer because, unlike in Scotland, there aren't individual constituencies to count. They're all multi-member constituencies. 6 members of the Senedd per constituency here, all calculated. We're using proportional representation, again using that d'Hondt method, which we can go into the details of some other time. I like to call it the Jefferson method, because actually 100 years before Victor d'Hondt, the Belgian mathematician, invented it, Thomas Jefferson, the American founding father, described much the same formula. Anyway, I digress. We're expecting the Labour Party to do extraordinarily badly. For the first time in their history, they have already conceded defeat in Wales. They will not come first place. They will not, in all likelihood, become First Minister of Wales, and even the current First Minister of Wales, Anulad Morgan, it looks like she may well lose her seat. There's a lot to come in Wales, and it might be amongst the most dramatic results we've seen today.
All right, Tom Harwood, last time you did your chit-chat about the d'Hondt method and Jefferson, I think Dawn needs to put on some headphones.
I did my headphones. I still don't understand it. I looked it up afterwards and I still have got no clue what Tom Harwood's talking about, but that applies to most things in life, to be honest with you. Tom, thank you so much. More from Tom later with more blobs on his board. OK, we now go to GBNews political correspondent Olivia Utley, who's in Downing Street for us. Olivia, absolutely seismic. You're not in Downing Street, are you? No, that's quite clear. You're not in Downing Street. You're in our Westminster studio. Olivia, absolutely seismic day for British politics. What's the latest for us?
Well, it is a huge, huge day, and I think it is hard to overestimate just how grim these results are for Starmer. And as Tom said there, it is only going to get worse. Labour admitting defeat in Wales. So what is next for Keir Starmer? Today he has fled Downing Street. We're expecting him to remain holed up in Chequers. This morning we heard from a few senior cabinet ministers who were rallying behind him for now. What I predict is a bit of a stay of execution for the Prime Minister, partly because of the reasons that ministers are giving on the airwaves this morning, that it's not sensible changing leader in the middle of a war, but also because the man that most Labour insiders, the only man most Labour insiders believes has a chance of defeating Nigel Farage in a general election is Andy Burnham. And Andy Burnham doesn't have a seat in Westminster. The thinking among Labour MPs is if you keep Starmer there for now, you can buy Andy Burnham a bit of time so that he can maybe run for a safe seat in Manchester. The issue there, of course, is that are there any safe seats in Manchester? Labour has done really badly across areas like Tameside, Wigan, Redditch, all of these really important places for Labour that they have historically held with ease. So much going on here. You've got Labour MPs tweeting. Someone like John McDonnell has been saying that a change of leader mustn't happen quickly. It mustn't be a coup. It must be an organised, orderly exit. So sort of throwing his weight behind Starmer, but essentially saying that he needs to go at some point. Diane Abbott saying similar on Twitter. There's no denying that these election results are going to be very bad for Labour. Yes, Keir Starmer is very unpopular, but it's the policies that drive unpopularity. Simply changing the leader without changing the policies will not avert disaster. So again, very, very qualified support for Keir Starmer. Dan Carden, Labour is losing today because we're a party that won't say Britain is broken. We have no answers for the working classes. This is bad news from Labour MPs. And that's before you even factor in those 1,500 odd defeated councillors. Those ex-councillors will be fuming today, and they will lay the blame firmly at the feet of Keir Starmer. Those are really important people in the Labour Party. They're the people who go out door-knocking at elections, who do the hard graft, get their hands dirty for the Labour Party. Keir Starmer is losing them. He's losing swathes of his MPs, although for now they don't seem quite ready to stick the knife in. He will cling on for a little while, but how much longer remains to be seen.
OK, Olivia Utley, our political correspondent, thank you very much for that summary from Westminster. But let's cross now to our reporter, Doogie Beattie, who is in Aberdeen for us. Doogie, that's going to be a major count as the results are just starting to trickle in from Scotland now.
Yes, well, the first count has taken place and it's over, and it is an SNP seat for Jack Middleton. He was nearly 7,000 votes clear of Labour in second place with 5,000 votes. And then comes the interesting part of this, because you heard Tom Howard there talking about those regional seats and the defiance system. That really, your first count numbers really go into the mix for your regional seats. And Reform were just about 300 votes ahead of the Tories. So as suspected, the Conservatives and Reform have locked each other out in this region, both polling in around 3,000 votes. And what will happen then is that means that those numbers, Labour will take that second place, and that adds to the regional seats that they can get. So the warnings that were coming from the Tory party that they may lock each other out are very, very real indeed. Now, there's another 5 seats to be decided here. We have just watched Stephen Flynn, the MP, the leader of the SNP in Westminster, arrive, and he is probably due to be elected within the next hour here, which really calls into question, can he ride 2 horses, a member of the Scottish Parliament and an MP at the same time? And what is he doing there? If he wants to be an MSP, is he going to go for the leadership of the party? Because to be the leader of the SNP, you have to be a member of the Scottish Parliament. But really, all eyes are still on Banffshire and Buckingham, where this morning all those votes that came in from the fishing villages and farming sides were mostly Reform, and the SNP was left in their wake. But as the edges of that constituency come in, as that constituency comes closer to Aberdeen, that has been reversed, and we can now see that that gap has now closed dramatically between the SNP and Reform. This is probably the best possibility of a constituency seat for Reform, and it is running very, very tight at this moment. There are 5 seats up for grabs. The 6th seat already has been taken, so we will be watching this throughout the day.
One quick question for you. I mean, it's a pretty seismic result, the SNP beating the Lib Dems up in Shetland. I mean, I think it's the first time the Lib Dems haven't controlled it since 1950. The SNP were gone. I mean, Nicola Sturgeon had completely tarnished them. What have they done to make such a dramatic comeback?
Well, it is amazing what they're doing here, because the big numbers, the big questions at the ballot box, especially up in Aberdeen, are over North Sea oil, over farming, over fishing, over immigration. All these things are not devolved matters, and it appears that the Scottish people have taken that into account. Have they gave up on Westminster? That is the real question here. Have they decided that maybe the power needs to go back to their own government? But this government, the voting system of this government, Dawn, is designed not to return a majority. Alex Salmond was the only man that managed to do that. The magic number is 65 seats. At this current rate of knots, I think we're looking probably at about 60 seats, which means that the SNP will have to go into some sort of coalition. But it really is, have the Scottish people lost confidence in the Westminster parties? And is that why we're seeing a rise of reform? Very often in second place in the initial polling, sometimes leading it. But have these Westminster parties locked each other out so much that the Scots are turning back to their own national way of thinking?
OK, thank you so much, Doogie Beattie in Scotland for us. We will bring you more on those Scottish results as and when we have them. What I thought was very interesting there, Charlie, was Doogie's comment that people have lost faith in the Westminster bubble, for people in Westminster. And you hear it so many times today from people being interviewed about this elections, whether they're in Scotland or Wales or in England, about how they have lost faith in politicians of all political persuasions. They just don't feel they're being listened to. And I think that's a message we're getting from literally all over the countries.
And indeed, we're getting some of those comments from serving politicians as well, talking about how they are losing their core support. We'll get more on that very shortly. But first, let's cross now to the Conservative Shadow Business and Trade Minister, Gareth Davies. Conservative joins us now. Good afternoon to you, Mr Davies. Not a complete disaster for the Conservative Party. Overnight, you've won some key councils and surpassed expectations elsewhere. But overall, the picture is bleak, is it not? The Conservative Party is continuing to decline since 2024.
Well, good afternoon. You're right to point out the victories. We're delighted about Westminster in particular, which is a flagship council for us. To take that back is a significant development, I think. And Wandsworth, Bexley, of course, which was a #1 target for reform. You remember Nigel Farage going around the TV studios saying Bexley is a shoe-in, we're going to take it over. Well, they haven't. So we are very happy about those. But look, let's just face facts. We have lost seats at this election. Of course, it was always going to be difficult 2 years after the last general election where we suffered a tremendous loss. But we are building back. And I think there's a lot for Conservatives to take comfort in with some of these results overnight, and they're still coming in. But it shows to me that Kemi Badenoch is taking a grip of the party. We have new leadership. She is popular, by the way, the most popular leader according to polling. And so there's some glimmers of hope there for us to keep going, holding the government to account, forcing these U-turns, whether it's on winter fuel payments or the family farm tax. We're proving that we have an effective role to play in our democracy, and we have a proposition to put forward at the next general election.
Gareth, but is your message getting through? As you say, Labour have a Starmer problem. Kemi appears to have a Conservative problem. You've lost Essex to reform. That was a Conservative heartland.
We're extremely disappointed about Essex. Of course we are, and I'm the first to acknowledge that. I hope it doesn't go the same way that Kent has gone under reform, where they've had mass defections and resignations and council tax rising. I hope it doesn't go the same way that reform have led Kent, and we'll work very hard to win Essex back next time. But for now, Kemi is very popular on the doorstep, I can tell you that for sure. The party is still rebuilding as a brand after a tremendous loss in 2024, but it gives me comfort that, A, we've got the leader in place who is known and is an effective operator. Okay. But secondly, on the economy, my area of interest in particular, we are the most trusted party, and I think that will stand us in good stead.
Gareth, you're not the most trusted party in Suffolk now. Reform UK have just gained that council from the Conservatives. That will add to your sense, perhaps, of discomfort that the Conservative brand is failing to get through to not only floating voters, but your own core support.
We've got to keep going, and I am extremely disappointed to hear that too. It's not a reflection of the hard work of our local members and our councillors who I know.
So what is a reflection of
very
them,
hard.
Gareth? Sorry, if it's not a reflection of them, what is it a reflection of? Are you still suffering from the view of the Conservative Party from 2024? Has your party not done enough to sort of shed its skin from that era of failure towards the end of the last period of Conservative rule? Kemi Badenoch says that the party is now under her leadership, new leadership, but has it changed enough? You still have frontbenchers who are part of those years of failure.
I think it's a perfectly reasonable question to ask me, and I think if you look at have we changed, of course we have. We've got a new leadership in place on things like the ECHR and the Climate Change Act. There's clear change happening within the Conservative Party, and that is based on us listening to the British public following the last general election. But there's more to come. There's more work to be done. Of course, we're still less than 2 years from that election defeat, and I think that is partly what is driving some of the disappointing results over the last 24 hours. But as I said at the beginning, there is a lot of hope. There's a lot of very good results in Westminster and Wandsworth and Bexley and other places that show that we are making progress. And if I just look at our vote share compared to 2025, just last year, it's actually up. And so again, it's not perfect. There's still work to be done, but we're determined to do it.
Gareth, if we're doing projections, looking at vote shares, if this was taken forward, the person with the keys to that door on our screens now, number 10 Downing Street, would be Nigel Farage. What's your reaction to that?
God help us. I mean, just look at where they've been governing, right? Look at Kent. I mentioned it before. They've had mass resignations. They've had mass defections to other parties.
Sorry, Gareth, when we're talking, sorry to interrupt, but when we're talking defections to other parties, the Conservatives have quite a high level of defections to reform themselves.
We've got a small number of people that I think Kemi has described as people that she doesn't believe belong in the party, and I would simply echo that. They're not going to be happy in the Conservative Party. We don't believe in a bigger state. We don't believe in mass nationalisation. We don't believe in changing the two-child benefit cap. We want less welfare and benefits, not more, and that's what reform seem to stand for. So they're never going to be happy in our party. But if I look at, the prospect potentially of Nigel Farage getting into Downing Street, if I look at what they've done so far in government at a local level, it doesn't bode well for the British public at a national level.
It didn't stop them voting for them, though, did it? In Essex and Suffolk.
Well, you'll have to ask people who voted for them as to their motivations, but I think as time goes on, it will be very clear to the British public that there are questions to be asked about Nigel Farage and his conduct. By the way, we still haven't got answers on the £5 million gift that he tried to hide. He doesn't seem to want to answer questions on that. But secondly, the more that comes out in terms of their policies and their decisions, whether it's putting up council tax, whether it's cancelling very odd projects like the Doge project that didn't go anywhere, or it is the conduct of their councillors, I think the British public will see them for what they are.
OK, Gareth Davis, one final point from me, please, is that you're speaking about how the Conservative Party has changed, just putting out an offering that is perhaps closer to what Conservative voters with a small c want. I think that's broadly right. The Conservatives have changed a lot since 2024, particularly on issues around immigration that you raised, but also on law and order and justice, etc. But it's strange, isn't it, that as you move more towards public opinion and Conservative opinion, your polling is going in the other direction. It's actually, gone down since that catastrophic election loss of 2024. I know people often accuse the media of obsessing over personalities, but is this not a classic example of the messaging changing and getting better towards those views, but actually it not cutting through because the people delivering that message said something very different just a few years before, and that you still have those same faces and voices leading the party? You haven't changed enough in terms of your personalities.
Well, I think, look, Kemi Badenoch served in the last government and secured a number of trade agreements. We have a lot to be proud for from our time in office, but it is very clear that she has changed our party, as I said, and people are recognising that. It's not just about policy, though. It's about the daily work that we do to hold this horrendous Labour government to account. If you think about the winter fuel payment U-turn, if you think about the family farm tax U-turn, the Chagos U-turn, that's because of the work that Kemi has done, her team of shadow ministers and the backbench parliamentary party to go day in, day out to hold the government to account. If I look at the Liberal Democrats, they don't stand up to Labour, and Reform just don't turn up. They literally do not turn up. So I think that seriousness of approach and pragmatism will be recognised by the public at the next election, and we just keep going on with the work that we're doing.
Gareth, just quickly and finally, thank you so much for your time, but how many more Tories can we expect to jump ship to Reform?
I'm not expecting any to jump ship to Reform, but as I said, if they are not in favour of a smaller state, lower taxes and better services for less, then they probably shouldn't be in our party in the first place. But I'm not confident that there will be any more defections to any other party from this day forward. We're a very united team, very happy team. We've got a leader we can all back and get behind.
OK, loyal words there, Gareth, and that seems to be rare quality in politics today. Gareth Davis, that's Conservative Shadow Business and Trade Minister. Thank you so much for joining us today.
We're still joined in the studio by our Deputy Political Editor, Tom Harwood. And Tom, just hearing the answer to that question there from Gareth, I suppose we should point out that the deadline ended yesterday, did it not, from Reform for Conservative switches going over to the Reform Party?
Deadlines.
And I have to say, Zia Youssef has been tweeting in capital letters that the deadline has now passed.
Yeah, right.
He is a man in Reform who is delighted that no more Conservatives will be joining the party, or at least elected Conservatives, I should say. Just to zoom back to the English elections in London, we're getting some results in from Barnet.
Oh.
Now, Barnet is an interesting council because this is the site of where we've had a number of suspected terror attacks, fire bombings of synagogues, all the rest of it, ambulances. The Conservatives are doing well in some of these wards. In a ward called Edwebury, there's a significant Conservative vote. There's a recount in a Labour-held ward of Whetstone, where the Conservatives have asked for that recount. So it does seem like there could be a bit of movement towards the Conservatives in Barnet, which perhaps is not particularly surprising given the attacks on the Jewish community there under this government. One more thing to say, and this is over in Wales. I'm sure we'll be hearing more from Catherine Forster on this, but the Welsh Labour Party is admitting its group could shrink down to just 10.
Wow.
10 members of the Senedd out of 96, all but admitting Anulad Morgan, the First Minister of Wales, will lose her seat. Now, if that does happen, and it does look likely now that that will happen, that will be the first time a sitting head of government in any of the countries that make up the UK has ever lost their seat from that position of being head of that government. That is a hugely significant moment in Wales, where the Labour Party has just completely imploded. And as those results begin to trickle through, we are seeing that implosion play out in slow motion before our eyes.
That's absolutely huge for Wales.
I've got a statement here. The veteran Labour MP, Graham Stringer, speaking earlier, he said that the party had severed connections with its core support. We've had plenty of senior Labour ministers on the programme this afternoon and throughout the day defending the record, but quite a few MPs are getting a bit more open and honest, frankly, about the state that the party's in at the moment. Graham Stringer here, he said that they're the worst results in Manchester for 60 years. This is a problem made in Parliament by Keir Starmer and a cabinet who have ignored the concerns of the traditional Labour voter. I mean, that's fighting talk that you'd hear from Reform UK.
Look, there's going to be a massive, massive battle internally within the Labour Party. Look at Manchester and Graham Stringer's area, or at least the wider area of Manchester. In Angela Rayner's seat, Reform has surged forward. But in Lucy Powell's seat, the Greens have surged forward. You've got this complete disaggregation of the Labour vote, and there will be some Labour MPs, like Graham Stringer, traditional working-class kind of Labour MP, who's saying, we need to go for that Reform vote. We're losing our heart and soul as the Labour Party. But then you'll have others, perhaps like Lucy Powell, perhaps like many of those people who are losing their seats in Hackney today, and in Southwark today, and in Lambeth today. You'll have all of these big Labour figures who are going to say, no, we need to look at the Greens, who are taking all of our seats. The Labour Party is being torn asunder from two different directions, and it's very, very hard to see how they'll put Humpty Dumpty back together again.
Very interesting. And so many of you are getting in touch. And the main points you are making is, please tell us what you're going to do. Stop having a go at the other parties and please engage. Many of you are feeling like all the politicians are not listening to you at all.
Right,
Very important.
Speaking now to our political editor, Christopher Hope. We had Gareth Davies on a moment ago, Conservative there, talking a lot about Reform UK. And so many of the comments, as Dawn was just mentioning on gbnews.com/your say, people are saying the more that the Conservatives criticise Reform, the more those Reform voters dig their heels in and actually think, I've made the right decision. There's going to be a lot of questions inside Labour about, is their strategy of going towards more left-wing voters the right one? But questions might also start to be asked in the Conservatives. Do we need to stop attacking Reform so much and perhaps, be a bit more like them in focusing our energy leftwards?
Yes, I mean the Tories always feel pressure from the Lib Dems in the West Country. That's part of the problem. But Reform UK, I mean, you've heard from Nigel Farage. They think they can replace the Conservatives. They think it's over for the Conservatives, is what Nigel Farage will be saying at a rally later tonight, which will hopefully feature on GB News. I think they do certainly feel that now is a moment to almost assume the mantle of the main opposition party, despite having far fewer MPs than the Tory party. And it could work, but we're in an amazing moment here. You look at Labour, though, they're being squeezed both by Greens and by Reform UK. And, of course, you've got Shabana Mahmood, who's pushing that tougher line on migration. But, of course, her idea is to allow migrants to arrive here by legal routes and to have... still to arrive, but with rather than jumping a queue and crossing the channel from France. So, yeah, it's extraordinary times, and so much more to come in the next 2 hours or so. Cheltenham, Lib Dems need to hold that one. Islington, around 3 o'clock. Can the Greens get that? The first major and a big moment there in London if Greens take Islington. And, of course, a bit later on than that, we'll be looking at Tunbridge Wells. Lib Dems need to hold that one. And then Sunderland, of course, a real target seat for the Reform UK party.
Very interesting. And lots of people are commenting on something Nigel Farage himself said earlier today. These elections are a referendum on Keir Starmer. Do you think they're right?
Well, they are, and I think we haven't said that enough, that they are. It's really about failure of this party over U-turns, the Peter Manson affair, their approach towards net zero. Is that right or wrong? And that hasn't really been talked about. Yes, of course, it always is. He says that, doesn't he? And in fact, one of his slogans was, get Starmer out, vote Reform. Now he says he wants to keep Starmer in, because it's quite helpful for him in the polls.
Well, that must be a mortifying feeling for those allies of Sir Keir Starmer who are going out and loyally facing the music today. But to hear their chief challenger say, we actually want your man still in charge because he's such an electoral benefit to us, that must be bruising.
It's so counterintuitive. And to hear Steve Reid tell you two earlier that, we don't talk to people in a way that makes sense. The communication is failing. That's why Wes Streeting cuts through. We think it's quite good, the Health Secretary, but also why Starmer fails.
Christopher, for now, thank you so much. Much more for you come in the next hour.
This has been a seismic day in British politics, and there's still much more to come.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on Friday, the 8th of May. I'm Dawn Neeson.
I'm Charlie Peters.
And I'm Tom Harwood.
I'm not going to walk away from those challenges and plunge the country into chaos.
I think there is a real threat that Nigel Farage could become Prime Minister, but that will be determined by whether or not this government can deliver the change the British public want to see.
The Prime Minister has vowed not to quit as he takes responsibility for Labour's abysmal local council results so far.
Meanwhile, Labour Minister Steve Reid admits there is a possibility Nigel Farage will become the next Prime Minister as Labour faces a local wipeout across England.
So far, Labour has lost 58% of the seats it has been trying to defend, with more than 50 of the 136 council results in so far. The party appears to be losing grip of its historic heartland.
And there's yet further misery for the Prime Minister as the number of migrants who have crossed the Channel by small boat surpasses that 200,000 level since 2018.
Meanwhile, Nigel Farage says the best is yet to come. Zia Youssef has claimed that the Conservative Party is dead.
Labour are being wiped out by reform in many of their most traditional areas, and what you're going to see later on today is the Conservative Party being wiped out in their heartlands like Essex.
That's obviously Nigel Farage there, and Reform UK are hoping to take further control throughout the afternoon.
This is unique, truly unique. But elsewhere in the West Midlands, Reform have absolutely smashed it. From Newcastle under Lyme to Tamworth to Nuneaton, Cannock, Dudley, it's remarkable.
Well, they're also hoping that they're going to be absolutely smashing it in Scotland, because the leader of Reform up there, Malcolm Offord, he said that he fought the Holyrood election to become Scotland's first minister.
I'm in it to win it, but at the end of the day, you know, we has, as I say, this has been a heartland for the SNP, so it's, you know, this is a real challenge.
So Keir Starmer says he's going nowhere, but increasingly backbench Labour MPs want him to set a timetable for exit. But voters aren't clear on his future.
Labour is doing well for the country, so I think he should just carry on doing what he's doing.
I think he should resign because realistically he is a Conservative.
I think he's really poor, just needs to go, get out of here.
He said Conservatives are coming back, and here we are.
And that's obviously Kemi Badenoch, and it's been a mixed night for Kemi and the Tories, losing 226 council seats, but they have taken Westminster City Council back from Labour.
He's doing a fantastic job. He's led our party to become the largest it has ever been in the party's history. I love working side by side with Ed. We make a strong leadership team, but he is the right person to lead us into the next election.
That's the Lib Dems. They are up 29 council seats, and they are celebrating because they say that they're headed for their 8th set of local election gains in a row.
That I know Zoe Garbett as Mayor of Hackney, and in fact so many people who run councils or indeed Green councillors will be holding the government to account from a local level to say it's outrageous that decades of austerity have stripped councils of funding.
Meanwhile, Zach Palensky's Green Party has had a huge victory in London, with its candidate elected Mayor of Hackney, ousting Labour.
Well, currently this is where we are at 2 o'clock, the day after the public took to the polls. Counting is still underway across the country, but for councils, this is the picture. And across the board, this is how it's looking for councillors.
And this is how it's looking on the map. Yes, we're getting more and more results trickling in now. We have had both Essex and Suffolk councils taken by the Reform Party. And we have also seen more and more London results begin to trickle in. Might we see a Green gain in Hackney? Might we see one in Islington? Might we see one in Southwark? We'll keep an eye out.
Good afternoon. So much going on here, so many political developments, but we'll start in Wales because Labour has admitted a crushing defeat after suffering disastrous local elections in England overnight.
Speaking in Ealing in West London, the Prime Minister said it had been a tough night.
I think it's very important that we don't sugarcoat these results, so I'm not going to do that. They are tough results, I accept that. They reflect voters who don't feel that their lives have changed enough or quickly enough, and that's been going on for a long time. We were elected to deal with that, and I'm not going to walk away from that responsibility and plunge the country into chaos.
Well, Reform UK has also made major gains across England, having won control of Essex County Council and also now Suffolk. Nigel Farage has hailed it an historic shift in British politics.
Labour are being wiped out by reform in many of their most traditional areas, and what you're going to see later on today is the Conservative Party being wiped out in their heartlands like Essex.
OK, so many strands to unpick. Absolutely seismic a morning in British politics. So let's go to the expert on this, GBNews political editor Christopher Hope. Christopher, I guess the biggest story so far, but it's possibly changed, is what's happening in Wales.
Well, it really is. Of course, overnight we're still going through these English county councils.
It's been a long night, Shopper.
County council counts.
Thank you for saying that, Charlie. Yes, indeed, there. We're about halfway through the 5,000 we want to count, but we are looking increasingly to what's happening in the Celtic fringe in Wales and Scotland. Wales, we now know Labour have conceded. It's going to be either applied held government or reform majority. We'll wait and see how that plays out. But it's a moment here in history. It's been held by Labour since 1922. It's never been not a Labour government since devolution in 1999. A real moment here. And will the former First Minister, as we must now call her, will she hold her seat in Ceredigion? We don't even know that.
And Chris, the Plaid Cymru leader arriving at accounts said there were lots of positive noises across Wales, saying that it's been clear for some time that Wales is ready for change. That's certainly happening so far, isn't it? And I think the focus shifting to Wales now, there's going to be a lot of questions asked about what could the next administration there do, because it is actually facing a lot of difficulty in terms of education, in terms of the economy. The health system there is facing a particular crisis. This has been quietly bubbling for quite some time, actually, the crisis in Wales. And there's been also internal political issues for Labour there as well.
Yeah, I mean, notably on the health service. So there was a time when Theresa May would often repeat Prime Minister's questions about how bad the Welsh health service was, with people leaving the country there to be treated in England, and that was a recognition of Labour's failure. But yes, there were poor, longer waiting lists, poor access to GPs, dentists, recruitment shortages. Also, Charlie, tension on immigration, demonstrations in Penhelly in 2020, Lechley in 2023, and Mould in 2025. We've got the lowest average wages in the UK. Labour arguably has failed Wales, and it's time for a change there. We're unlikely to see the same thing in Scotland, where the SNP are likely to hold on because, frankly, the unionist parties are too divided.
And actually, there's already been an SNP gain in Scotland of Shetland. They've gained it from the Liberal Democrats in one of those constituencies. Two things to note. There are two Stephens standing for the SNP in Scotland. Stephen Flynn and Stephen Gethins, if people recognise their names, they're MPs down in Westminster for the SNP.
Yes.
They make up 2 of the 9-member contingent of the SNP party in Westminster, including its leader, Stephen Flynn. It looks likely both of them will win seats in the Scottish Parliament, meaning 2 Westminster by-elections could be on their way after today.
All right, you two, just a breaking news update. Dan Thomas, who is, of course, Reform UK's leader in Wales, he has arrived at the Senedd election count in Newport. And let's cross over now to our chief political correspondent, Catherine Forster, who's over in Wales for us. Catherine, this is turning out to be a major day in Welsh politics, particularly for Labour, but also perhaps for Reform UK.
Yes, and also very notably for Plaid Cymru, who a reform source that I spoke to a few hours ago said that Plaid will win in Wales. But this is a huge political earthquake unfolding today in Wales. Wales is a country that has been Labour for over 100 years. Those Labour heartlands, those mining heartlands, Nye Bevan, the National Health Service. And since the Senedd devolved government started in 1999, Labour have run Wales. That ends today. Welsh Labour have absolutely conceded that. They have said that it's been a very difficult night. They say that they expect to get around 10 MSs. Now, that is just a tiny fraction of the 96. We've got a new system here. We've got 16 mega constituencies, each with 6 MSs. So they're only expecting to get about 1 in 10 of those. It's quite extraordinary. And I'm here in Ceredigion, Penfro, which is in the west. And this is where Eluned Morgan, the First Minister, we're literally waiting for her to arrive. She could be here any minute. It is increasingly looking likely that the First Minister is going to lose her seat here. An absolutely huge moment looming. The count's still going on currently, but Plaid are very, very confident indeed. They say, the leader said there's been lots of positive noises across Wales, but it's clear that there is an appetite for change, and they have been encouraging people to vote for what they call the correct change. Now, it looks, from all the projections and everything that I've heard, that Plaid will get the biggest number of seats, but followed by Reform. And talking to somebody from Reform, they said you can expect to see a green Plaid west of Wales, and Reform do very, very well indeed in the east and down in the south. It really is quite incredible. It is unthinkable just a couple of years ago that Labour would find themselves in this position in Wales, of all places.
Catherine, we're just hearing from the leader of Plaid Cymru, who says that he is hearing lots of positive noises across Wales and is feeling quite confident.
They are very confident. I was speaking to somebody, a Welsh person earlier on, and they said that everybody they'd spoken to had voted for Plaid. Clearly, voters have turned their back on Labour. They've been in power for a very long time here. They're now in power in Westminster. They've got that double incumbency problem. So they are turning elsewhere, and a lot of them are turning to the Nationalist Party. And I think it's very interesting that, distinct from the SNP in Scotland, Plaid have been very, very soft-pedalling the nationalist narrative. They really want to focus on cost of living, childcare, bread and butter issues. They don't want to scare people off voting for them because they're a nationalist party. That looks like it's a long way down the road. But if they have the biggest number of seats, we're potentially looking at a United Kingdom where Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland will all be led by nationalist parties, which I think would be quite incredible.
Interesting little factoid here for you. It's Sir David Attenborough's birthday today. We discussed it at length yesterday. Didn't we, Tom Harwood? You might have remembered.
No idea.
Yes. Well, interesting. Labour have won elections in Wales since before Sir David Attenborough was born.
Wow.
That is how long they have had success in Wales.
That's a great fact, actually.
Do you know another fact? David Attenborough is older than Marilyn Monroe.
She's dead.
Yeah, but he was born before she was.
Sensational factoids flying into the GBNews studio this afternoon.
Anyway, in politics...
We've got one for you, actually, at home. Our poll of the day. It is the two-party system dead? Yes or no? Certainly looks to be going in that direction. I haven't voted yet, but you can guess what I'd be going for there. But you can scan the QR code on your screen now or visit gbnews.com for that.
OK, let's move on. Please do have your say as well, gbnews.com/your say. Lots of you are getting in touch. Lots of you offering to carry Keir Starmer out if he doesn't volunteer to leave. And lots of you are saying you are feeling ignored. OK, joining us now is former political director to that very Sir Keir Starmer, Luke Sullivan. Luke, good to see you. You might have heard me just saying there. Lots of our viewers and listeners are saying if Keir Starmer doesn't go, they'll offer to carry him out of number 10 themselves. He's not very popular at all. If he was not a leader of your party, you might have actually done better.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thank you for having me. I mean, look, there's no denying, I think, as the Prime Minister downwards in the Cabinet, Steve Reid earlier, talking about there's no sugarcoating these results for the Labour Party. And what is sad for the Labour Party is we're only partially through these results. Over the next 24, 36 hours, there will be, many more hundreds of councillors, Scottish Parliament and Senate members losing their seats, and the electorate have spoken. And the key question for the Labour Party is going to be how do they react in this coming period, and it is clearly a moment of grave political peril, both for the Prime Minister but for also the Labour Party as well.
But Luke, it looks perhaps, based on what we're hearing from various reports and whisperings around Westminster, that actually it perhaps isn't that grave for Sir Keir Starmer. There isn't going to be an immediate challenge to him due to various reasons. Potentially one of them is that he's done so badly as Prime Minister that nobody wants to take over that mess. A little bit like a tenant pouring bacon grease down their sink and the landlord can't find somebody else to take over the property. It's in such a disastrous state. That seems to be one of the perspectives floating around at the moment. Who would want to take over that door on your screens right now, number 10, at this moment in time, considering the very dire state that the Labour Party is in and the country's in more generally?
I mean, that is probably true if you're talking about ordinary people, but we are talking about politicians. And look, there are clearly a number of highly ambitious individuals who covet that job of Prime Minister. Now, I think where you are right is that for a number of reasons, we are in a position where nobody is either prepared to move or able to move. And, you know, the very nature of our constitution and also the rules of the Labour Party mean that whilst that remains the case, the Prime Minister will stay in place. And also the Prime Minister himself by, you know, actually, let's, you know, it is quite extraordinary that the Prime Minister was out before 9 o'clock this morning trying to set the tone to get out that he recognised that he takes responsibility for these results.
Why is that extraordinary? That's just basic leadership, right? I mean, why do we see that as extraordinary? It's what should be done.
I think partly your answer, I think to the public that's true, but I think to you know, those of us in the Westminster bubble, he directly is briefing. He's going nowhere. Look, we are not living in normal times. Ordinarily, prime ministers less than 2 years into having a huge majority do not have to say things like that in a mid-term. There is no denying the, you know, how serious a political position the Labour Party is. Now, the question for the Labour Party is much of this debate has been focused on the personality of the Prime Minister. Look, I think, you know, the Prime Minister clearly does have issues with his popularity when it comes to the voters, but it's more deep-seated than that. And I think, as ever with the Labour Party, it is in danger of focusing on easy answers and solutions. Yes, the Prime Minister and his leadership is an important part, but frankly, the Labour Party, if there is any solace and anything to cling on to this lunchtime, you know, after, you know, the first set of results, it's that we are still 3 years away from a general election. The Labour Party's got a big majority and it's got the ability to do things in power. And those are the questions the Labour Party needs to be asking itself. The Prime Minister has set out quite clearly in terms of saying on Monday he's going to be giving a big speech about what that change looks like. And that's the only way through for the Labour Party, which is to focus on what is it going to do to change the situation, to change people's lives. Because I think if there is a common thread through all these different election results, it is that the British public have time and time again voted for change and are deeply frustrated with the status quo. Now, the Labour Party was elected to deliver that. It's got the opportunity. It still has fate in its hands if it can do something with that power over the next 3 years.
Luke Sullivan, Chris Hope here in the studio with the presenters. You advised Keir Starmer up to election day in 2024. What would you be advising him to do right now? He's being pressured by MPs to set out a timeline for leaving office. Is that what he should be doing next?
Look, if the Prime Minister wants to go, the surefire way of him going is setting out a timetable. I don't think Keir Starmer or any of his political allies have given any signal that he's willing to go without a fight. He personally believes that he is the right person to lead not just this Labour Party but this country. I have no doubt that that is his, you know, sincerely held view. The question, I think, you know, in terms of reflecting on what is going to be a big moment on Monday, not because the speech in itself is going to be the answer, but ultimately time in power, especially for Labour governments, is so fleeting that the government has really got to work out. It is completely understandable to say we've had a difficult 2 years. The question, it is still in their hands to use the power of government to do the things it was elected to do. And fundamentally, the only way through this, not just for Keir Starmer, but for the whole Labour Party, is to show that a Labour government can deliver. And if it doesn't, then these have been very good results for reform and Nigel Farage understandably is saying that he may be on course to win a general election. We've also seen that, we haven't seen the full results yet, but later in the day we expect the Green Party to have a number of good results as well. This isn't just about an end of a two-party system. This is about a risk to the Labour Party and the Conservative Party as the two natural parties of government.
Luke, just a quick question, and finally, we've kept you for too long, I appreciate. If keeping Keir Starmer in power meant Nigel Farage getting the keys to the door of number 10, which we were just looking at on our screens now, would you advise him to go?
Look, I think fundamentally that is a question only the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer himself, can...
But you've been an advisor, Luke. What would you say? If Keir Starmer going stopped Nigel Farage getting the keys to number 10, what would you say?
But I just don't think it's as simple as that. I genuinely do not think, obviously,
it is for many voters. It really is that simple. Keir Starmer goes, more people will vote for Labour.
Well, I don't think we are in as... I completely get why you're asking the question. I just don't think that's the situation we're in. But look, the Labour Party's got a big...
The voters do, and they're the important ones.
Well, they are, and the voters are always right, no matter whether I agree with them or not. But look, the fundamental question for the Labour Party is, what is it going to do with its big majority? What's it going to do with power to change? Because at the moment, it has got agency. All the opposition parties can shout from the but this Labour Party has to decide what it's going to do to change and actually to deliver for the British people that elected it.
Luke, I'm sorry, but your leader Keir Starmer has to three-line whip his MPs to get them to agree with him, to get them to back him. That's not a leader that has control.
I mean, I think Keir Starmer's not the first leader to whip its MPs on any issue.
It doesn't matter who did it first. Keir Starmer had to do it now.
Well, look, I think, as I said at the start, the Prime Minister is got a very difficult political position, and he is, over the next 48, 72 hours, in grave potential danger, not because I think there is a plot or a plan to remove him, but because of human nature. What I think is going to happen over the next few hours as these results come in is there is a difference between the theory of what the election results are and the actuality, and people are human beings. And look, this is a dangerous moment for the Labour Party, for Keir Starmer. But I think as often with the Labour Party, it's in danger of reaching for the simple questions about, is this just about changing the Prime Minister and that being a solution? I think there's a much more detailed, more bigger question, which is,
yes, I think there is
what is your plan?
The plan is under a lot of criticism from some Labour MPs, though, Luke Sullivan. Graham Stringer, veteran MP, he said that the Cabinet and Sir Keir Starmer have severed connection with the people who've sustained the Labour Party since its beginning. They are pursuing policies that are interesting to them and their mates, and they are not working. He goes on to say most of the Cabinet, most of the Parliamentary Labour Party have not had jobs outside the voluntary and public sector. They have been bag carriers for MPs and ministers. Their experience of the real world, as we could call it, is very limited indeed. Which I suppose leads to the question, Luke Sullivan, what plan is there? If that is the diagnosis from a senior Labour MP, a veteran of the party, that people surrounding the Prime Minister basically haven't got a political clue, then how can he change course?
Well, look, that is a Graham Stringer is a very clear-spoken member of Parliament with a long record of service to the Labour Party, and I think what I would say about with Graham is I hear he's saying that in a way that he wants the Labour Party to succeed. I do think one of the failures of the first 2 years of this Labour government has been a willingness or an unwillingness to actually have proper debate sometimes about what is the approach. I also think some blame and responsibility is required for Labour MPs as well, because look, Keir Starmer understandably sold the Labour Party had changed, that it had elected Labour MPs who were going to grapple with some of the big, tough decisions. I think the problem, and this has been a side effect of some of the management, some of the political choices that have been made, but fundamentally the Labour Party and the country has to wake up to some really big, difficult choices. Not, much like Dawn's question earlier, some of these are either or. They're not, we want a bit of both. And the Labour government, I think any political party who is in power now is going to have to grapple with some very, very difficult choices, which also means upsetting huge members of the electorate. And I would just say to Labour MPs, if there's any benefit from being as unpopular as the Labour Party currently is in the polls, it's whether or not you try and use some of that to the advantage of doing difficult things in the national interest.
That's a very interesting point there, and we'll close it there. Thank you. Former political director to Sir Keir Starmer, Luke Sullivan. I'll start with our Deputy Political Editor, Tom Harwood. In reaction to what Luke just said, Tom, that's a very interesting point, isn't it? They are so unpopular, they don't have the opportunity to take risks. He did speak quite a lot about how there are difficult choices to be made. Didn't really set out what choices they should be or what he wants the party to do. But Luke's right, isn't he, on that point? If the party is performing so poorly, it does give you some political freedom to take a risk.
That's certainly true, and yet what has the Labour Party done in government? They promised they would, for example, perform sweeping reforms to planning reform. They haven't done that, right? Like, housing starts have collapsed rather than going up. Now, I can see, Christopher, you're over there, you're talking about the public planning policy framework, which they have changed substantially, yes, but they've kept in place the building...
It just takes time to work through, though.
They argue that, but they've kept in place the building safety regulator, they've kept in place the second staircase rules, they've kept in place lots of things that are stopping densifying building in London, a particularly hobby horse of mine. On the bigger picture, what we are actually seeing is a Labour Party that has tried to do some big reforms, for example, to welfare, and they were battered back by their own MPs. They've tried to do some big reforms and found themselves buffeted by those members of Parliament that they thought would be relatively supine in this process. That there were so many people reporting about the selection process, how they were going to be all stormtroopers, how all of these people that were selected to be Labour MPs would go along with what the government says. Actually, they're much more, perhaps, Milibandite than they are Blairite when they come to politics. I do just want to say we've had a bit of news in from Scotland. Stephen Flynn has won his seat up in Aberdeen, which means we are now nailed on for a Westminster by-election in the coming weeks or months. He, of course, was the Westminster leader in Scotland for the SNP in Westminster. And big questions now, might he challenge the First Minister of Scotland, John Swinney, for the big job up in Scotland?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's more breaking news. SNP leader John Swinney says it's clear his party will be the largest in the election. So shall we go to Scotland now and talk to Tony Maguire. Tony, who is in Glasgow for us. Tony, John Swinney says he's pretty much won it. It's in the bag.
Interesting that, isn't it? I mean, we only kind of less than 10 votes into the count here of the Scotland's 73 constituencies, but already party leaders are kind of getting dragged into talking in absolutes. Just a moment ago, actually, Anas Sarwar came into the stadium in Glasgow, and bearing in mind none of the seats have actually been called here, he was talking very defeatist, and it's all to play for. The SNP hasn't won any seats from Labour. Very much the game is yet to come. But nevertheless, Anas Sarwar talked quite negatively when he entered the arena here in Glasgow. But, I did have a chance to ask him, because of all this talk of an SNP majority, well, the other side of that coin is the potential for a super union coalition, and that would involve Labour kind of biting the hatchet with reform. So I put it to him of whether he would still reject that notion.
Reform have no part in terms of any kind of ability to form a government here. I'm of course disappointed that we are going to see Reform MSPs elected, but let me make a broader point, and this goes beyond just the politics within the Labour Party. I think it goes for who we are as a country. I'm sick of politicians who want to use people's legitimate concerns to divide this great country. And sadly, it seems that those who seek to divide us and use people's frustrations to divide us are going to win the day today. But I still ultimately believe that the politics of unity and change will win this country, and I look forward to being part of that fight.
So the other political leader that we're clapping eyes on today is, of course, Malcolm Offord. He's the Scottish leader of Reform. And earlier today, he said that, well, he's not sure whether he'll win his seat. You know, he'll be really interested to see how the union parties all split the vote, and what he thinks his Inverclyde seat is something of a bellwether seat that actually is a good, almost litmus test for how the nation is feeling. But nevertheless, we are quite early in the day, and we're only in the first half of the match, essentially. You know, 10 or so seats have been called, plenty more constituencies, and then, of course, we get on to the dreaded D'Hondt calculations for those regional seats. I'll spare you the explanation of that formula as well, Don. Maybe you'll get to the end of your shift without it being forced upon you once again.
Tony Maguire threatening to do the D'Hondt formula.
No, Tony. No, thank you.
Yeah, all right. We'll leave you there. Thank you, Tony Maguire. Let's cross over to our deputy political editor, Tom Harwood, who's back at the map. Tom, what's going on?
D'Hondt is just a simple votes divided by seats plus one. We'll get into it later, I promise. We won't actually, don't worry. This is Scotland. We've started to see this map be coloured in, and it is already a sea of yellow. Here's Stephen Flynn's seat that we were just talking about a second ago. The Westminster leader of the SNP, now an MSP up in Aberdeen. We've also seen some SNP gains in the Highlands. We've seen some SNP gains in just below the Central Belt as well in the borders. But ultimately, we're expecting this. We're expecting the SNP to sweep up these 73 constituency seats. And we're expecting the other parties to do much, much better when it comes to the regional seats, which are counted later. Because in order to do that peculiar D'Hondt formula, you first have to get the seats that are won by the first past the post method, and then you apply the formula to them to achieve the seats that are done on the regional list. Interestingly, the SNP has gained Shetland from the Liberal Democrats. For donkey's years, the Liberal Democrats have won both Orkney and Shetland, two separate seats in the Scottish Parliament, one seat together in the British Parliament. But yes, the SNP has gained Shetland there from the Liberal Democrats, so that's an interesting advancement, but still we're starting to see that big advance from the SNP. And who would have thought it 2 years ago, when the SNP was swept off that map at the British Parliament election, when the SNP was swept away by the Labour Party, reduced to a rump of just 9 members of Parliament, I think just 8 members of Parliament at the general election. It is astonishing that the SNP has risen right back up in the polls, but it has risen up as the Labour Party has collapsed. Let's turn to England, speaking of the Labour Party's collapse, because this was once a sea of red, now it is a sea of black. What does black mean on this map? That means no overall control. Places like Hartlepool, now no overall control. The Reform Party won every single seat in Hartlepool that was up for election, but only a third of the seats were up for election. That's why this is black and not turquoise. We can see, however, some turquoise on this map. Newcastle-under-Lyme has gone to the Reform Party, and in the county council elections, these are the biggies, we see both Essex, a huge win for the Reform Party there, sweeping away the Conservative Party in Essex, and also in Suffolk we're projecting that the Reform Party have won that as well. More of those to come, of course, as the afternoon goes on, but let's turn to London for this moment, because we have seen Havering go to the Reform Party, but interestingly, Bexley was retained by the Conservative Party. Now, this was a reform target that they didn't manage to get. They didn't get very far into Bexley at all, and the Conservatives are very happy that they've retained that. And the Conservatives have also gained Westminster from the Labour Party, and gained enough seats in Wandsworth from the Labour Party that it looks like they will control Wandsworth as well. Interestingly, up in Barnet, where there have been a spate of assumed terror attacks recently, and attacks on Jews, it looks like the Conservatives are doing slightly better there, and the Labour Party is going backwards there, perhaps in regard to all that context. The Green Party doing well in Hackney already, winning the Hackney mayoralty. Some of the boroughs of London have their own directly elected mayors. Most don't. Some do. Nobody knows why. But we'll be looking to the councillors elected in Hackney and in Islington, where the Greens think they're going to do very well as well. But zooming out, there's a lot more seats still to come. More than half now counted, but a lot more to come in England. And then we get to Wales. And the one story so far from Wales is just how terribly the Labour Party thinks they have done. Already saying that out of the 96 seats in the Senedd, the Labour Party expects to make barely 10 of them, including the First Minister of Wales, Anulad Morgan. They expect that she will lose her seat, the first sitting head of government in British history ever to lose her seat at an election. Well, we're still waiting for the first results to come in. They're all regional for the first time ever in the Seneth's history this time, and that means they'll take a little bit more time than the Scottish seats to count because there are 6 members per these multi-member constituencies. Much more to come.
Tom Harwood, thank you so much. Bit more breaking news from Scotland. Stephen Flynn, who you were just talking about, has just won his seat, and he has told the crowd that let it be known that soon Scotland will be an independent nation and we will thrive as a result. More fighting talk on that one, Christopher Hope.
Well, we've heard that before from the Labour Party. That's why they exist. Their whole point of the SNP is to break away from the rump United Kingdom, as they would describe us.
It wasn't once in a generation, though, wasn't
yes,
it?
Yes. How long is that? 12 years, 50 years, 20 years? I'm looking at who is calling for this timetable for the PM to go. It is the Labour left. They're clearly, they're uniting around some message. Ian Lavery, he's called for it. John McDonnell, he's called for it. Graham Stringer, less of a left-wing, more of a maverick, but they are calling for this timetable. Right? They recognise the PM is going nowhere, he made clear this morning, but the idea of a timetable, that'll be in the papers over the weekend.
Well, there was some story this morning about Ed Miliband suggesting there might be a timetable going forward as well. I mean, is there any truth in that?
Well, I would say there is. That wasn't denied by the PM this morning. When he was interviewed at 8 a.m. this morning, he said simply that Ed Miliband made clear he supports me. So the actual content of the phone call, set a timetable, Prime Minister, wasn't denied, which in my world means it's probably the correct.
Interesting. Ed Miliband telling you to go.
We're just hearing now that Labour have held Bury and Rochdale in Greater Manchester. That's just coming into us now. So some good news for Labour activists there, but those are the developments that we've got at the moment. Thank you very much, Christopher Hope. We'll be joining you shortly, but let's cross over now to the Conservative Shadow Crime and Policing Minister, Matt Vickers. Matt, this has been a difficult day of results for the Conservatives, but where you have had gains, it's been in former areas where you've recovered in Westminster and Wandsworth as well. Critics of the Conservatives might now say that you're becoming sort of a regional party of the South East. I know that you're a Stockton Tory who campaigned for the party in your 20s. Is it quite painful seeing it move away from being the party of the Northern powerhouse and more to London and the South East?
Well, firstly, I'm not buying that as a premise. You know, the great Jay Bartoli's had his election result in Tynemouth and he's won a council seat. We've gained one from Labour. We haven't got the results in from Sunderland. Hartlepool was obviously quite grim, but actually I don't really buy into that when you look at what was coming forward today. When you look at what's happened overnight, the election results that we were expecting to get, that all the pollsters told you we were going to get, have come in some ways. Some of these elections were last fought in 2021, when the county council elections were fought in 2021, when the Conservative Party was on 43% of the votes. It was always a huge challenge, but actually, when you look across the mix, you look at Bexley, as we just mentioned, you look at Fareham, you look at various seats that Reform were planning, expected in fact by pollsters, to take and didn't take. And then you go further still and you look at Westminster and Wandsworth. We've got a hell of a long way to go. We've got a hell of a lot more to do. But having been out on those doorsteps, people are liking what they're hearing from Kemi. We've got a lot more to do, got a lot more to sell, and we need to make sure that people get to hear her. But people are liking what they hear. We've made slightly better, we've made significantly better than last year's results. A lot more to do.
Matt, but people aren't liking what you're selling in Essex and Suffolk, are they? Those have gone to Reform.
Yeah, I think, do you know what? When you see councils like that lost, it is devastating because you think about those hard-working activists, those councillors, those candidates who've been out beating the street, who've been serving their communities in all sorts of ways and working very hard. But you do have to put it in context. You do have to look at the fact that all the pollsters were telling us it was going to happen. You do have to look at the fact that those seats were last fought in 2021 when we were on the vaccine bounce. We were higher than high. We were on 43% in the polls. So it was always going to be a backwards movement in that sense. It's still disappointing, but there is signs of progress elsewhere. There are green shoots. We're going to keep watering them. We're going to keep getting Kemi out there and getting her heard by the great British public.
Well, Kemi is an Essex MP. Why are people in Essex and Suffolk being drawn to reform? What is it about reform they like that they don't like about the Conservatives?
I think, well, you know, some people before this election would have told you it was going to go the way of Kent last year, which was a devastating result, a really devastating result. We've had a very difficult and disappointing result in Essex, but the counting's still going on. It's not on the same scale as we were on in Kent last year. There is progress, but we've got a hell of a lot more to do. We've got to get our pitch out there. We've got to tell people a little bit more about what we stand for. Actually, when I've been out there speaking to people, they do like Kemi. They do like the fact that she is a strong woman who says what she thinks. They do like her views on the high street, and they need to cut those business rates for small businesses. They want to see 10,000 more police on the streets, and they want to see someone in there with a backbone who's a proper leader who can make the serious decisions we need to fix our economy.
I mean, Matt, let's be frank, the reason why the Conservatives have suffered so much in 2024 and since is because of immigration, the so-called Boris wave that was unfortunately masterminded under the Conservatives, so very much to that party's detriment. And I suppose one of the reasons why so many voters are going to reform is that they see stronger policies on immigration. And now you might say, look, we've changed a lot since 2024. We are now, in some cases, even to the right of reform on immigration, and we are putting out proper plans on the ECHR and all the rest of it. But a problem that many voters are having in Essex, perhaps, is that they're hearing people who were part of the Boris wave administration saying something different. The messaging might be improving, Matt Vickers, but it's the same voices putting it out, voices that perhaps they've lost trust in.
Are you on about when they're listening to Suella and Rob, or are you on about when they're listening to our guys? Touché, Charlie. I think, actually, you've got to look at that in its context. I like the fact that you referred to proper plans. We have got a proper plan. I would never... You've heard me on GBNews several times talking about the mistakes that the previous government made on this front. The one thing that they were doing was bringing forward that legislation. Well, they brought it forwards. They brought it and took all the legal challenges with it, meaning... As our party says now, and as it said then, if you break into this country, if you come here illegally, you should be detained and you should be deported. We've now got a real plan under Kemi. It's not a back of a fag packet jobby. A real plan. You can read the detail of why we need to leave the ECHR, why we need to have a cap on the number of people who can come here legally as well as illegally. There was some progress being made by the last government in the sense that the Rwanda plan would have worked if it was ever given the chance. There was progress on legal migration in the fact that we stopped people bringing as many dependents, and that reduced the number. There was progress on the fact that we'd put that salary cap, well, the requirement to earn enough to support people who you brought. But there was a hell of a lot more to do. The last government made mistakes. When that next general election comes, we will be selling what is a very considered, very well thought out plan. But there is still a big policy difference between us and reform. When it comes to benefits and welfare, we believe that this country needs to live within its means. We believe that there needs to be a significant reduction in the welfare spend so that those people who work hard and do the right thing get to keep more of their money. We also think the government should be frank. And when politicians tell you they're going to spend money on something, they need to tell you where it came from. That's why we got in the mess the last time with the Labour government. That's why we got in lots of other messes with our economy in this country.
Matt, the way it's going at the moment, just quickly and finally, we're looking at either Zach Palensky or Nigel Farage as our next Prime Minister. Who would you prefer?
I think there's quite a long way to go. And I'm looking forward to seeing Kemi Badenoch take on the helm and the keys to number 10.
She's going to be the next Prime Minister, is she?
Yeah. Watch this space.
Loyalty.
Grateful for your time this afternoon. That's the Conservative Shadow Crime and Policing Minister, Matt Vickers. Well, let's cross now to Aberdeen to join our reporter, Doogie Beattie, who's there for us. Doogie, what developments can you bring us now?
Well, since the last time you came to me, Stephen Flynn has been duly elected, the MP, as the new SNP MSP, and he did it in quite some style, ahead of the Tories in second place, and then Reform and Labour. So really, you know, Labour and the Tories, the Tories and Reform, again locking one another out of those regional seats. The real big disappointment, though, for for the Reform Party. Conrad Ritchie just missing out on his first run out here to try and get in as an MSP, just over 10,000 votes, and Karen Adams for the SNP, just about 10,400 votes. So you can see how close that ran. That was their best chance of a constituency seat, but that has given them an amazing amount of data for the next time round and for general elections, of course, in this area. Stephen Flynn, when he came to the microphone to accept his election, he talked about the oil and gas fields here and how he intended to fight Westminster to make sure that the Ed Miliband ban on new drilling, etc., would be done away with. But he also spoke about independence, as did Karen Adams. But Karen Adams, straight afterwards, actually spoke about how close it was and that they now needed to have a conversation. And ironically, Stephen Flynn refused to speak to GBNews. I did ask him to talk to us, but he definitely declined to speak with us. So just 2 more seats to go here in Aberdeen. But the real story of the day is how close Reform came to actually getting a constituency seat on its first run out in Scotland.
Very much WBT there for us in Aberdeen.
OK, and let's go now to GBNews chief political correspondent, even Catherine Forster, who's in Wales for us. Catherine, what's happening?
Yes, well, we're here in West Wales in one of these new 16 constituencies, and we are witnessing nothing short of a massive political earthquake here, because Labour and Wales have gone together for over a century, and since the Senedd was founded, devolved government back in 1999, it has always been Labour running the Welsh Parliament. That is set to end today. Plaid looking very, very happy indeed. Their leader has said that there's lots of positive noises across Wales. There's an appetite for change, and they've been encouraging people to vote for what they call the correct change. The other big winners likely to be the Reform Party, most likely in the east of Wales and particularly in the south. There is a recount going on at the moment. But here in West Wales, we're looking at a massive political moment, because Eluned Morgan is the First Minister here. This is her constituency. She arrived just in the last 5 minutes. She didn't take any questions, but it is widely expected here, and we should get the results in the next few minutes, that the First Minister of Wales is going to lose her seat. So a massive moment if that happens. Welsh Labour conceded defeat a long time ago and are now saying that, yes, it's a very difficult night. They may get about 10 MSs. Now, there's 96 to be elected altogether, so the fact that Labour are now expecting to get as few as 10, I think, illustrates just how catastrophic things are for Labour in Wales. I thought there was a very interesting comment this morning from the former Welsh First Minister Karen Jones, and he had said that Labour were no longer seen as the party of working people.
Thank you very much for that analysis and your update there, Catherine Forster, our chief political correspondent.
OK, it's very interesting. It's been an absolutely huge morning and afternoon, and it's like many of you have been getting in touch. And the one message we are getting from all of you is that you are not happy with many of the politicians because you do not feel that you are being listened to. And despite what you've heard all political commentators say this morning, it isn't a Labour problem many of you have. It is a Keir Starmer problem. And that one person, I'm sorry, forgive me, I've lost your name now, but you said you actually got into the polling booth and you are a Labour voter. You wanted to vote for Labour, but you couldn't bring yourself to vote for Keir Starmer, so you voted Green.
So breaking news to bring in quickly, from our reporter Jack Carson in Birmingham. He just told us that the first 4 pro-Gaza independents have been elected to Birmingham City Council. He says gains for them in Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood's constituency. Let's just quickly cross over now to our Deputy Political Editor, Tom Harwood. Tom, that's a big blow to Labour.
That is a massive blow to Labour, and also tells us something very particular, that in places where there is a large socially conservative Muslim population, like in the constituency of the Home Secretary, it's not the Greens who are picking up those votes. It's actually specifically identified independent Muslim candidates campaigning on issues like Palestine who aren't a... I mean, I've listened to a lot of the... I think there are around 59 of these candidates in Birmingham. That's enough to control the council. Now, whether they will or not, I think it's a stretch that they would manage to get a majority on that council. But there are a lot of candidates there targeting their efforts in these very, very Muslim areas, and they have a message that is distinct and different from that of the Green Party that's often conflated, because the Green Party has what would be considered perhaps in these communities to be baggage of social issues, social liberalism, pro-LGBT rights, all that sort of stuff.
Heroin. Let's not forget the heroin.
Pro-legalising drugs.
Open borders and prostitution.
Let's just say these particular Muslim independents are not pro-heroin and certainly not pro-transgender issues, but even not pro-mainstream lesbian and gay issues either.
Sure. And that's a really interesting split. And I think we will see more of this in the coming announcements. Let's bring in political analyst William Kajani, who's with us here in the studio. William, your reaction to that breaking news from Birmingham, please. Those 4 pro-Gaza independents winning seats in Shabana Mahmood's area.
It just underlines how bad today is going to continue to be for the Labour Party. We're seeing it not just in one place, but it's everywhere. It's Wales, it's Scotland, it's these councils in England, and it's from all sides as well. They haven't won a real head-to-head that I can remember, and it really brings home how much political trouble Keir Starmer is in. You know, in terms of his medium to long-term future, it looks finished. It has for some time, but this is just underlining it. And there'll be many Labour MPs who may not want to go yet. They might think that they've got bigger problems to deal with over the summer, but they'll see results like this and it will hammer it home. It's a body blow.
We keep hearing this morning, William, that Labour has a Keir problem. Do you think it would be better for the Labour Party if Keir Starmer wasn't the leader?
Yeah, no doubt. Absolutely no doubt. You see it in his approval ratings. You see it also in the way that other members of the cabinet who, again, they might not be the most popular politicians in the world. Some of them have very high disapproval ratings, but they have areas of support for them. They can bring people behind them. Keir Starmer sort of ended up in a no man's land where he isn't able necessarily to inspire, and he's got people behind him, but it's due to the fact that they have their positions in the party due to him being there. So it really is just looking more dire by the second for him.
William, what's been very interesting has been, of course, the rise in so-called sectarian politics that's been tracked. Indeed, since the last election, that was a big issue in several wards. One of the only major Tory successes of 2024 was in Leicester, and there was sort of pro-Hindu campaigning there. So it's not very much, certainly not confined to any one party. But there are accusations that left-wing parties are engaging more in this behaviour. The Green Party and indeed independents as well. Hearing reports from one count I think it's in Sheffield, that's been interrupted because the victorious Green Party candidate, Mustafa Ahmed, he raised the Palestine flag after his vote number was announced and began chanting "Free Palestine." This trend is going to grow in our politics, isn't it?
It is. Well, firstly, it's an issue that the world is aware about. This is not the only country in which people have had very strong responses to absolutely horrific images coming out of Gaza and the Middle East. It's happened here, but it's happened elsewhere in Europe. In the US, it's also driving an awful lot of discourse. So I don't think it's just limited to Britain. I would imagine it would continue. And then, of course, again, the Middle East has been an agenda setter for some 2 or 3 decades. You know, in the past it was about getting involved in foreign wars and conflicts. That was bringing effects back here. You have that situation now in Iran and the Strait of Hormuz, and you are going to see it be at least one of the concerns that people have when they're voting. Cost of living is the biggest one. The polling tells you that. And don't get me wrong, there's a obviously, as a local element, people want their potholes fixed, they want better services, but it will continue to grow, and we shouldn't be surprised at that. We live in a very international world nowadays, and you can see it all the time.
William, can you analyse what we have seen with the Green Party? It has been amazing. I mean, they were pretty much nowhere in sight. They were talking about the environment and hugging trees, etc. Zach Walensky comes on the scene, and suddenly his popularity has dipped down this week, but suddenly they are winning a lot of seats, they're winning a lot of councils, they're winning a lot of votes. What is going on here? Why are they so popular?
OK, so Zach Walensky's leadership has a lot to do with this. He took the leadership of the party, and he's basically been a more forceful leader. He's managed to get himself into national conversation, and that's happened at the same time as the breaking up of British politics. You have more parties now where leaders are getting more attention. Nigel Farage has done this very successfully with reform, and he's offered something different to a nation that's been very tired and upset with poor leadership from the Conservatives and then also from Labour. That's what they're saying. And the Labour Party has moved more to the centre-right, and the Green Party has moved more to the progressive left. There were a lot of people in Labour who supported Jeremy Corbyn who did not have a place to go. Your party launched, that went up in flames rather early. They had their own problems, their own infighting, and the Greens have taken advantage of that. And Zach Walensky has been bold, he's been unashamed, he's been brash, and he's offered something different. He's offered something that's motivated people. And in the same way, and we're seeing it on the right as well, and we're also seeing it in Wales, if you're able to offer, albeit a tired and upset and happy electorate, something to motivate them, you can make very big gains and great results.
But William, they are offering a lot of concern about Gaza. Let's be frank about this. I know you say this is an issue in other countries, but we should be clear. It does appear to be worse in Britain in terms of how much attention that issue gets among our electorate, perhaps due to sort of the migration patterns that have happened here, the insular nature of some of the communities in British cities. Even France, which has a major Muslim population, doesn't appear to have the same level of Gaza focus in its national politics. It is a uniquely troubling British trend that we have so much focus there.
Yeah, I'd respond with two things to that. Firstly, I think the government's response and the way it's been perceived, this is incredibly important, has changed the way that voters, particularly those who have links to the Middle East, have responded. They've not been happy with the response that they've seen from the government. They feel that that's something they should be punished for. In other countries, it might be slightly different, and I think that has a role to play as well.
William, just very quickly, next Prime Minister, give me a name.
Angela Rayner, people won't be happy for me for saying it. She's the only one I've backed.
William Kajani, thank you so much. Right, it's been a pleasure having your company for the last few hours with Dawn, but let's go over now to GBNews political editor Tom Harwood. Tom, what's going on?
Charlie, it's happened. It's actually happened. The Labour Party has won a seat. It's astonishing. Up here, they have actually won a constituency seat from the SNP here in Scotland. It's called Na Elina Anla. I think I've butchered that tremendously, but it's one of the Highlands and Islands. It's actually Charlie Kennedy's old patch, perhaps Liberal Democrats' old stomping ground. But up here, the Labour Party have won this sparsely populated, unpronounceable island in the north of Scotland. So they'll be very happy about that. But for their turn, the SNP have been sweeping across the board. We've seen whether it's in the borders or just in the sort of almost Highlands, the mid-Scotland and Fife region, I suppose we're supposed to call it, or indeed up in Shetland, where the SNP have taken a seat from the Liberal Democrats. That was perhaps a surprise. Orkney and Shetland, one seat in Westminster, two distinct seats in the Scottish Parliament. Well, perhaps few were expecting that the SNP would take Shetland from the Liberal Democrats, but that happened. Also, the SNP is delighted here in Aberdeen, where Stephen Flynn, the leader of the SNP MPs down in Westminster, has won a seat in Holyrood. The Conservative Andrew Bowie, Shadow Scotland Secretary, has been very aggrieved, actually, that the second-place Conservative lost out on that seat. The Conservatives claim that the 6,000 votes that went to Reform in that particular seat cost the Conservatives a seat. I'm sure we're going to see a lot of this on the Reform side, on the Conservative side, saying each one stole each other's votes. We're going to see that ad nauseum as the day goes on. But crucially, we're not expecting to see many Reform constituency seats. Reform say if they do exceptionally well, they will win one constituency seat. Why so few? Because they're expecting to pick up the regional seats. These are the proportional representation top-up seats, which aren't calculated until all of the seats in any particular region have already been counted. So lots more still to come in Scotland. We're hearing more in England and Wales too. But the man to take you through all of that is, of course, Martin Daubney.
Tom Harwood, absolutely magnificent, superb stuff.